Let's start this review off with a question that I'm willing to bet not even 10% of the people watching can answer. Who's heard of the Brack Show? Think I'm talking shit, don't ya? Yeah, pretty much what I expected. But fear not, for I've come to bestow my knowledge upon you simpletons about this golden egg. But first, have some history. In 1994, Cartoon Network adapted the Hanna-Barbera superhero cartoon Space Ghost into Space Ghost Coast to Coast. The goal was to make an animated late show like Jay Leno or David Letterman. The show was actually a hit and spun off two other shows, Cartoon Planet in 1995, and of course, The Brack Show in 2001 on Adult Swim. The Brack Show follows Brack and Zorak, two of Space Ghost's villains who were featured in Coast to Coast and Cartoon Planet. The two live with characters literally named Mom and Dad. I'm being serious here, as they go about their days getting into numerous shenanigans. Now, their ages are unclear, but they are stated to be high school students. However, it's best not to question the logic this show employs. To really get a good grasp on this show and what it's like, I'm going to review their third episode, Time Machine. With that out of the way, it's time to roll. This episode starts out with Mom and Dad discussing what they want to have for dinner. Mom hasn't cooked anything, so Dad decides to take the family out to Fish Packets for one of their annual dinner specials. Mom calls out to the duo who are upstairs playing a video game called Head Kicker. Brad gets the call, and they go downstairs to the kitchen.
Well, what have you boys been up to all weekend?
We've been playing Head Kicker.
I've been playing. You've been getting a red-ass beatdown.
And now's a good time to explain the dynamic between Brack and Zorak. Brack is the innocent and naive one, whereas Zorak is the douche who picks on him. This dynamic was done to death in the 2000s to mixed results, but this show nails it for a couple of reasons. For one, Zorak is evil. They don't even play it off with some bullshit about how he cares about Brack deep down inside or anything. He's an evil bully who's proud of his miscreants. He's still a character we're supposed to like, or at least find funny, but they are being plain with his character instead of giving us a sugar-coated mess that contradicts what we see on screen. 2. Brack never lets Zorak's bullying get him down. In fact, there are times when Brack even gives lip to Zorak, this one included. That's how you do it. When one character in a duo is less likable in universe, their shittiness shouldn't have any significant effect on those around them. And if it does, they have to fail in the end. And when Zorak's shittiness is grand scale, it always ends badly for him. Dad tells the guys to get ready to go to Fish Packets, which prompts Brack to sing a song about how it's his favorite restaurant.
All of the wonders of the sea will be served up hot to me. Baked or broiled or lightly breaded, just the thought makes me lightheaded. Can there be a smarter sauce than a bowl of tartar sauce? Fish Bucket, there I come!
Yeah, Brack sings a lot in this show. Now, normally this might be a turnoff, but what helps in this case is that Brack's songs are short, and while they're supposed to be bad, Andy Merrill still has a good singing voice. Cringe comedy like this should annoy the characters, not the audience. Brack is then questioned by Mom if he finished his homework, to which he sheepishly replies no. This leads to Mom telling him that he can't go, and by extension Zorak can't go either, because you know for a fact he didn't do his homework either. Brack begs for his parents to let him go, and Dad decides to tell Brack a scary story, all the while Zorak uses the bathroom in the background.
Zorak, I thought you were going to the bathroom.
I did.
Oh, dear.
This is probably a good time to leave.
This is actually a brilliant joke, because you don't even realize that Zorak was pissing and or shitting himself in the middle of the kitchen. You just heard him making a bunch of noises while Dad tells his story, so it sounds like Zorak is reacting to that. Anyway, Mom and Dad go to Fish Packets as Brack mopes about his envy.
You go ahead, Dad. Eat on the poop deck. Rub the magic clam. Get your picture taken with Gary Grouper. See if I care. 'Cause I do.
What's the big deal? Fish Pocket sucks, homework sucks, everything sucks.
Hey, you should have done your homework too, bub. One more F and you're going right back to grandma prison.
Zorak! Time scrum up right again! From me too, boy! Zorak! I ain't going back there. I can't.
No, I have no idea what Grandma Prison is, and the episode doesn't explain it either. But that's the beauty of it. Brack sings a song yet again, lamenting that he can't go to Fish Packets, and after Zorak remarks about how they'll need a time machine, Brack mentions that he has the key to Thundercleese's time shed. As they go there, we get treated to this beautiful exchange.
Hey, Zorak, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what?
Where are we going to find enough squirrels to make a kite?
Are you really that stupid?
I swear, the fact that more people don't know about this show has to be considered a war crime. They go back to Friday and coax their past selves into going into the future and doing their homework for them, while the present ones just play head kicker all day. This goes about as well as you think it would.
My head! Oh no! This is a time where they talk about going to fish pockets! Fish pockets? Let's eat! We can't! We didn't do our homework! Man, all I gotta hear is welcome to fish pockets, sir. How many in your party? I say, that's me! We're not going, Brack! But I'm hungry.
Yeah, all four of them just ended up playing head kicker the whole time. And then we get a whole musical montage of them attempting the same thing. This keeps going until the whole room is overloaded with past Bracks and Zorax.
Wait a minute, this ain't working. Nobody's doing the homework.
I haven't eaten in 25 days! Me either! Somebody feed me! We're never gonna get the fish pockets!
This episode has no visible time lapses, so I'm gonna have to take them at their word that they've literally been ripping their past selves from history for almost a month and somehow haven't caused the timeline to implode. I think Chrono should take notes from these guys. Brack says he wishes homework never existed, and Zorak tells him that they can always just go back in time and prevent homework from being created. In the past, they meet two wizards named Merlin and Marlin, who are inventing a bunch of shit. They pose as the presidents of the future and successfully convince the wizards not to invent homework. When they get back to the present, they see homework was never invented, but neither was fish packets.
Let's get the fish pockets!
Fish a pocket? What are you talking about, son?
I'm talking about fish pockets, my favorite restaurant!
Brack, your favorite restaurant has always been Lord Wellington's Beef Trapeze.
Really? That sounds pretty good.
I love how this is the only instance of messing with history having any sort of negative consequences on the present. I'm guessing Merlin and Marlin also invented fish packets? Who knows? Anyway, we're treated to a blatant instance of we didn't know how to end the episode.
Life is too short to worry about eating and making kites from animals. Better to use your time for the schoolwork. Only at the school, of course. And maybe you'll grow up to be someday the president of the future. Or you could be snatched up by a gigantic terrible bird and torn limb from limb on a lonely mountaintop. Do you understand what I'm saying, son?
Yeah, buddy!
Yeah, it looks like they forgot to return all the past Bracks and Zorax to the original timelines. But either way, that was Time Machine. This episode gets an easy 9 out of 10 from me. I know that sounds like a hasty judgment, but there legit is virtually nothing wrong with this episode. Some people might consider the constant music gags to be padding, but they really don't last long enough for me to think so. The only problem I can find with it is that the story does take a bit long to get started, thanks to a joke Brack makes about one of his pants packets being haunted, but that's really it. The rest of the jokes are just perfect in how they land. That's really the strength of this show. It wants to be a pure comedy and knows how to be such. I might return to the show again to examine another of my favorite episodes from the show.
Today we're going to review a movie that's not released in 2002. Seriously, I did not intend to make that pattern. It just sort of came out of nowhere without my attention. But yeah, let's review a movie that's released in 1996. The movie I am talking about is a film which the whole idea and concept came from commercials promoting Air Jordans featuring Looney Tunes characters. Now, certain people would tell you that the movie had a pretty clever premise and idea, but in reality, it's just a shameless attempt to make more merchandise and more commercials for more money due to the success of the commercials. The movie is called Space Jam. In some ways, I'm honestly quite surprised that a movie like this existed. I mean, the idea is Michael Jordan being around with Looney Tune characters. That just doesn't sound real to me. That's something that I would expect from a bad fan fiction story, or even a satirical comic book. Not a full-length film that actually got released in theaters. That's insane! Well then again, we live in the same world where 50 Shades of Grey got its own movie in theaters, so I guess anything is possible. Apparently some idiot from Warner Brothers thought it would be a great idea to turn those commercials into a movie. And I don't understand why, because Warner Brothers were making so much money teaming up with Air Jordan with those commercials and gaining a lot of merchandise off of it. It's not like they were running out of money, they were the top marketing draws back in the mid-90s. So because enough is never enough for these greedy pigs, they decided to make a movie to make, well, more money. Now, I'm already crushing childhood memories when I review this movie, and some of you are probably wondering, why don't you like this movie, Jim? Well, this is a negative movie review, so of course I'm going to do that. But before I do, just remember, just because I review a childhood movie that you liked, explain to you why I don't like it, and telling you why I think this movie sucks, does not mean I'm telling you to stop watching this movie. I'm just simply giving out my opinion. You don't necessarily have to agree with me on it. If you can't respect that and understand that, then you are an adult child who would whine on just about anything. Well, then again, I'm practically used to the negativity and bad publicity as it is, so I guess it really doesn't matter. But bottom line is, I don't care if you like shitty movies that I don't like. And I'm not calling you an idiot for liking shitty movies. So, with that being said, after a long-ass introduction, let's move on to the review. So our movie begins with, surprisingly enough, the highlight of the entire movie. We get this scene where Michael Jordan is in his childhood. He talks to his dad, how when he grows up, he wants to become the greatest basketball player of all time. And it's a nice little touch, and it gives you a good motivation inside of you that makes you want to, well, do something with your life. Unless, of course, if you're a little kid watching this. But other than that, it's a nice little scene. After that little scene, we cut to, now let's be honest here, the most memorable thing that everyone remembers when they think about this movie. The Space Jam intro. Surely there is someone out there that can memorize every line of dialogue, animation, acting, and just about everything that happens in this movie, but I guarantee you, no one in this planet forgets this fucking intro.
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got the real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam.
Seriously, this is one of the greatest intros I have ever seen in any other movie. I love this intro, despite not being a fan of basketball. And if you look closely to the stuff that's being shown in the intro, the stuff that's being shown and the way how it's edited, it's actually kind of like a documentary of Michael Jordan's career and life up to this point. It even shows you photos of the school he's been and shows footage of the games he's played when he was in college. It's just amazing.
Come on, one time for the ladies, say it. Who that is? Not all the fellas, say it. Who that is?
The compilation of photos and footage that's being shown all works really well thanks to the editing and the special effects, and of course the biggest icing on the cake, the theme song, Space Jam.
Come on and slam, and welcome to the jam. Come on and slam, if you wanna jam.
Again, fucking Space Jam!
Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got a real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam.
It fits the whole style of this intro perfectly, and it works.
We're gonna take it into overtime. Welcome to the Space Jam.
It's loud, energizing, catchy as hell, and it definitely gets your blood moving and makes you want to play basketball. But it's not going to work for me because I don't play basketball. But the point is, the music gets you pumped up!
And y'all wanna know why? Why? 'Cause it's the slam jam.
I mean, for God's sakes, this theme song is so good and so catchy that numerous people on the internet have actually made remixes of it, even to this day. That alone should tell you how good this song is, or how easy it is to make remixes off of it, but either way, it tells you something about the song.
Y'all wanna know why? Why? 'Cause it's time to slam jam. Come on, everybody say nah, 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 nah. Come on, let me hear you say
And just when you're hoping that the whole movie's nothing like this, it all falls downhill, and it's never gonna get any better from here. At least for me. Michael Jordan publicly states that he's retiring from basketball because he felt like he's done everything he could in his career, and his father passed away after the last game he played. Oh yeah, and Michael Jordan also said that he's starting his career as a baseball player. You might think that's bad writing, but that actually did happen in real life. I'm not kidding either, look it up. Then, for some reason, the camera goes up, we go to outer space, and it takes us to an amusement park. Or should I say, an amusement planet. Okay, whoever came up with the name of that amusement park should be fired because you're just asking for trouble right there. I guess it doesn't matter because the amusement planet absolutely sucks. Pretty fitting name now that I think about it. It's here where we're introduced to the main villain of the movie, voiced by Danny DeVito.
Did you hear him? Did you hear him? That little brat is right. I've told you, if I've told you once, I told you 1,000 times.
Good choice, but would you like to know what the name of the villain is? It's Mr. Swackhammer. I like Danny DeVito as much as the next guy, but you gotta admit, it's pretty embarrassing when you have to do a voice acting role for a character named Mr. Swackhammer. I'm just gonna rename him to Fut, short for Fat Ugly Troger. I don't care if it's immature, I like it. Mr. Fut goes on a rant telling everyone that he keeps telling his employees that he needs new attractions to save his business, but they just keep fucking up for whatever reason that we're never given. Then Mr. Fut tries to think of an idea to improve the business. He says that he needs something crazy, wacky, practically anything cartoony. And the idea he was looking for would eventually pop up after he sits on the remote playing some Looney Tunes shorts.
I'm an elf! Shoot me! Yes! Please!
I may not own an amusement park, but common sense would tell you that classic cartoon shorts isn't enough to make your amusement park good again.
Make 'em.
Cool.
And so begins the conflict of this movie, I guess. Mr. Fudd wants the Looney Tunes to make his amusement park good again, and he's gonna send 5 of his minions to force the Looney Tunes to work with him. I guess they're minions because the first time we see them, they just kiss his ass like no tomorrow. But yeah, they're coming for the Looney Tunes. Oh, and we also get the scene where Michael Jordan is playing baseball, but that's not important. It's just there for filler. The aliens arrive on planet Earth and they find the Looney Tunes by, I swear I am not making this up, going underground to find this circle thingamafucker with the Warner Brothers logo that acts like a portal, go through it, and enter the world of Looney Tunes. Hearing that explanation just makes me feel sorry for the poor gullible kids that actually buy into that bullshit and spend countless hours digging holes underground to find the portal. True story, one of my aunts at least knew one kid that actually tried to find the Looney Tunes that way. Poor little bastard didn't stood a chance. Back to the story. The aliens find Bugs Bunny and they pretend like they haven't heard of the Looney Tunes to try to get Bugs Bunny to do one of his character traits. He does, and right when he is about to walk away, the aliens shoot him. Which is kind of funny, I should say. The aliens then tell Bugs Bunny to go gather up all of the Looney Tunes characters for a little meeting. Going off the record here, am I the only one that thinks that these 5 aliens are some of the most stereotypical and non-threatening villains ever to be conceived by anything in fiction?
One small step for one giant leap for Moron Mountain.
I mean, really, I couldn't even remember their names. Do you? Aside from their character traits? I mean, let's face it. This little shit is the small but bright stereotype. This little shit is the aggressively hostile one. This little shit is the tall dumbass stereotype. This little shit is the mentally crazy one. And this little shit is the tough leader. Either way you look at it, these little shits are all stereotypes. You can try and justify their bland character traits all you want, but no matter how hard you try, the sad fact is, these guys are... Well, I'll save that until we reach to the point where the game begins in the movie. Anyways, I'm going to skip a lot of things that happen with Michael Jordan and his family. It's boring and it's just there for filler and they're not even funny in the slightest. Although the only thing worth noting about these scenes is this part right here.
There you go. Roadrunner.
Just wait. It's coming.
Stop this cartoon.
Yes, this is really happening.
We've got an emergency cartoon character union meeting to go to.
Nope, you're not high, and you're not even dreaming. This is for reals happening.
Dang, where'd they go?
Damn, so many questions are coming out of my head right now. I am, honest to God, mind blown right now. Anyways, moving on. They have a meeting and the aliens convince the Looney Tunes that there is nothing they could do and they are going to be their prisoners. And just when all hope is lost, Bugs Bunny pulls a trick up his sleeve to give them more time to survive from the aliens. Here's how he does it.
Why?
Just a sec. Leave them and wait, boys.
Give them a chance to defend themselves.
Wow. That is just embarrassing right there. The aliens stopped their invasion all because Bugs Bunny just wrote some fake book telling them to give them a chance. You guys have guns that could shoot lasers and cause mass destruction. What's a fucking little book gonna do to you?
Do we have to?
It's in the rule book.
It is. Okay, it is in the rule book.
I said this before and I'll say it again now. Nobody is stopping you! You guys must be the shittiest aliens ever when you can't even do your job of invading a planet right. So because the aliens are stupid, Bugs Bunny quickly comes up with some kind of challenge to beat the aliens so that they could survive. They quickly examine the aliens and it turns out that they are small. Just small. With that incredibly obvious fact, just by looking at the aliens, they challenge them to a basketball game. Oh, I get it, because basketball is known for tall players. Ha ha ha. Funny. Everyone in the meeting watches a video that explains how basketball works, and the aliens know for a fact that they're going to lose because, again, they're short. So they head back to planet Earth to get something or some kind of help to beat the Looney Tunes in a basketball game. And here's how they do it. They go into an arena watching a basketball game dressed like this.
I'm so sorry.
Was this kind of clothing acceptable in the 90s? Because I seriously don't think people dressed up like that would go well in public. Anyways, the aliens arrived on the basketball game so that they could... I swear, I am not joking, I'm not lying, I'm not making this up. For those of you who haven't seen the movie, the aliens arrived to steal the talent off of the best NBA players. Yeah, stealing talent, making the NBA players suck completely. Now, while I admit that the ability to steal talent off of people is a really unique idea, don't you think it's suspiciously convenient for these aliens to have that kind of power, especially when they needed to become really good basketball players to beat the Looney Tunes in a basketball game? Something tells me that the planets are aligning right about now. Anyways, the aliens steal the talent of 5 basketball players and they manage to get away with it because the goo that they used is completely invisible and people seem to believe that it's some sort of crazy disease that's affecting these basketball players, so I'll buy it, I guess. Now before I skip anything, I just want to show you this one quick little moment that happens when Michael Jordan is watching the news of the NBA players losing their talent. His friend, I guess, comes over and says this.
It's open! Come on, Michael, it's game time. Get your Hanes on, lace up your Nikes, grab your Wheaties and your Gatorade, and we'll pick up a Big Mac on the way to the ballpark.
If that line right there doesn't tell you that the whole movie's a sellout and it's just there to make more money, then I don't know what does. Anyways, back to the story. The aliens steal the talent and transform into intergalactic monster basketball players, or as Sylvester calls them,
They're monsters!
clever. The Looney Tunes realize that they're screwed and they need another basketball player to even the odds. And what better choice than arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan. And it just so happens that Michael Jordan is playing golf with his friends, I guess, and the Looney Tunes have their own way of getting Michael Jordan to play basketball with them. A little bit of subtlety would be nice instead of just outright kidnapping him. Now before anyone says anything, yes, I know for a fact that this review so far is just me giving out the whole story of the film without actually watching the movie. But you know what? The movie's biggest flaw is the story itself. And I still don't know how, to this day, no one has ever talked about it, or at least I haven't heard anyone that complained about the story, because it is, well, we'll get to that later when we finish it. Skipping a lot of things that happen here, because up to this point, the story starts to have all these scenes that are just an excuse to have the game to happen right away, and then you have all these filler scenes that don't really add up to anything.
And we've scheduled a 12-lead stress test at neurological battery to
and fail to be fun. And before anyone brings this up, yes, this is the movie that also introduced us to a new Looney Tunes character named Lola Bunny.
Has anyone here ever played basketball?
I have. I'd like to try out for the team.
And for those of you who knew Lola Bunny from the new Looney Tunes show, she was completely different back in the day. And God bless whoever came up with the idea to change her character completely. In this movie, Lola Bunny's character was this very bland, beautiful but strong type. And I believe around this time of the movie's release, this type of character trait would slowly catch up, but not portrayed well until much later. And for those of you who are shocked that such a thing like a sexually drawn animal exists, yeah, she's drawn that way, and she acts that way too. You can complain about this, but that was a thing in the 90s. She isn't the only one. There's Mina, Fifi LaFume, I guess since she's pretty popular in the furry community. And if you really want big examples, there was those quick animation shorts that featured more sexually drawn female characters that have a lot more fan service than Lola Bunny's. I could go on all day with this, and I know I'm going to be severely wrong when I discuss it, but the bottom line is, this kind of stuff was okay back in the day, and there is a thing called fetish, whether you like it or not. Here's a life advice from me. Do not criticize others for having a fetish unless they do something horribly wrong, like stalking or raping. But enough of that, let's move on. After a lot of filler, I presume at this point the Looney Tunes know everything about basketball thanks to Michael Jordan and Lola Bunny, I guess, in order to play basketball to save their lives. But before I begin the quote epic climax unquote, I have to recap everything that we know so far. And I want all of you to really pay attention to the story closely and ask yourself how a story like that could work. Here's the recap. An amusement park type planet from outer space has a boss that's doing business poorly. He sees the Looney Tunes and thinks that's going to improve the business. 5 short aliens go to planet Earth to capture the Looney Tunes. They do so by heading underground, find a portal to enter the world of Looney Tunes. And just when the aliens are about to capture the Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny makes a one last ditch effort to buy some more time in order to survive from the aliens. The aliens fall for a dumb little trick. Bugs Bunny then challenges them to a basketball game because 5 of these aliens are short. I repeat, 5 of these aliens are short. The aliens head back to planet Earth to steal talents off of 5 really good basketball players in order to beat the Looney Tunes. The aliens become intergalactic alien basketball players, or also known as Monstars, and Bugs Bunny knows for a fact that they're screwed and they need another basketball player to even the odds in order to win. And the basketball player just happens to be Michael Jordan, who just retired from basketball. And everything that I am telling you so far just so happens to occur right after Michael Jordan was beginning his career as a baseball player. While all the planets are aligning, Michael Jordan agrees to help the Looney Tunes and isn't at all freaked out at the idea that cartoons are real right in front of his face and just accept it like it was just a normal day on Mondays. After a lot of filler, the game has one huge stipulation. If the Looney Tunes wins, they're free from the aliens, and if the Monstars win, the Looney Tunes and Michael Jordan will all be slaves for Moron Mountain for the rest of their lives. And I have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. All I know is that the aliens exist, cartoons are real, Michael Jordan made a huge discovery, my friends are weird, my enemies are strange, my family's a liability, pies and cakes are a lie, the jam is the truth, everything in the media besides basketball and Looney Tunes is garbage, the earth is the center of the universe, heaven and hell don't exist, the Illuminati is a joke, reincarnation happens when you're dead, every cartoon that we know is an angel, and Michael Jordan is our Lord and Savior, the God of this planet. Who am I? Where am I? What am I? Why am I? How am I? There's no Jesus Christ. The second coming will happen when LeBron James enters in Space Jam #2. I went overboard with that part, but all joking aside, doesn't the whole story feel completely forced and contrived in every sense of the word? I mean, am I the only one that thinks this? Everything that's happening in this movie is just as batshit crazy as the story from the Titanic animated movie. And that had dolphin tears that help you communicate with animals. Seriously guys, think about it. Looney Tunes, aliens, basketball game, Michael Jordan, some character named Lola Bunny, Danny DeVito as Mr. Fudd. The whole fucking thing is just an excuse to make a story off of a crossover between Looney Tunes and Michael Jordan, all because of the success of the commercials. Does nobody in the entire planet notice anything wrong with this picture? Now that I got that out of my system, it's time for the climax to begin. It's an epic showdown between the team's Toon Squad against Monstars. Michael Jordan and the rest of the Looney Tunes going up against 5 still generic as hell monsters that are in it for the sole purpose to have a reason for this movie's existence. And that's the cold-hearted truth right there for those of you who like these aliens. They are not original. They are not even just evil stereotypical villains or minions. They are just tools created for a reason to have Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes play basketball together. That's it. As for the basketball game, you know, the one thing the movie is building up to all this time, the game is... Okay, look. Overlooking the fact that I'm not a basketball fan, overlooking the fact that this game is the highlight of the film to many people who had childhood memories with this movie, overlooking the fact that the whole movie was centered around this basketball game because they wanted to make more money off of more commercials and merchandise off of the movie itself, but here's the fact and the way that I see this game. It is one of the most generic and predictable games I have ever seen in my life. And I can say that for a fact because back in the day, I've seen a lot of movies, including those that are for family entertainment. And some of these movies just happen to be about a group of losers who couldn't win a game to save their lives, yet at the end of the movie they somehow overcome the odds and actually win a game. Examples being Bad News Bears, Angels of the Outfield, Little Big League, and Little Giants, which is the one game that I will show in comparison with Space Jam's game to prove my point that it is cliche. With that said, here we go. The bad guys dominate the good guys throughout the entirety of the first half of the game.
I'm gonna rip your head off!
When halftime starts, the bad guys rub it in the good guys' faces that they are going to lose and there's no chance to come back strong.
Have a nice halftime, girls!
The good guys head to the locker room, have a little moment with each other, give out a motivational speech about faith moving mountains, we can overcome the odds, blah blah blah, you know, all that shit.
Even if they beat you 99 times out of 100, that still leaves
One time.
The second half of the game begins and the good guys actually start to make a huge comeback and score a lot of points. And just when things are starting to pick up for the good guys, the bad guys do something to make matters worse. Regardless, the good guys still continue to push the pace and both teams are neck and neck in the scoreboards, and the good guys only need 1 point to win the game, and it just so happens that they needed it right when the game has about a few seconds to make that winning point.
Coach, there's still 4 seconds left. We can beat these guys! Yeah!
The good guys give it their best shot, the bad guys did whatever they can to stop them, a miracle happens, and the good guys manage to win the game clean. And that's your whole game in a nutshell. Now let me ask you, aside from the fact that the movie is animated, it features Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes, oh yeah, and a pointless cameo by Bill Murray.
No way. We'll find someone.
Going up against the Monstars, and you have seen a lot of funny jokes here and there, and I use the term funny loosely. What makes this basketball game any more different and entertaining than the other games that you've seen in movies where it's about kids going up against opposing teams in a certain sport? Exactly. So to wrap things up, the Looney Tunes obviously win, and just before the aliens are about to go home with Mr. Fudd, Michael Jordan asks them,
Why you take it from this guy?
Because he's bigger. He's bigger than we used to be. What are you doing?
oh, so now they realize that they're bigger and stronger than their boss. Ha 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 ha! That's funny! But yeah, the aliens defeat Mr. Fudd, I guess, in the most unsatisfying way possible. And it seems like their new home is the Looney Tunes world. And just to prove my point that these aliens are still nothing but tools for the sole purpose of getting the basketball game started, you never, and I mean ever, see them again in the Looney Tunes. They've done their job, and they're never coming back. But anyways, things return back to normal for the Looney Tunes. The aliens return Michael Jordan back to Earth. By the way, how is it that nobody on the basketball arena are scared at the fact that they're seeing a freaking alien spaceship with their eyes? Michael Jordan returns the talent back to the 5 basketball players that the aliens originally stole. The 5 basketball players then tell him that Michael Jordan doesn't have it in him anymore to see if he can play basketball again. Michael Jordan says otherwise, and he returns to play basketball, which actually did happen in real life. So that was Space Jam. Why the fuck is this movie getting a sequel? Look, I'm sorry, but either way you look at it, this whole movie is nothing more but an excuse to make more merchandise and commercials off of this movie, because the original commercials where it features Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes promoting Air Jordans were doing so good back then. To be fair, it's not one of the worst movies ever made, but it's certainly one of the weakest, and I don't think it holds up well to this day. Michael Jordan's performance in the movie is really bad. Every time I look at the screen, you can tell he's just doing this for a paycheck, and he's not interested in anything that's happening. I mean, just look at his face. Look at it! The Looney Tunes themselves in this movie aren't that good either, or at least they're not as well written or funny as they were back in the classic cartoon shorts. And the humor that they give is about as funny as the bad comedy stuff you'd see in the mid-90s. They are just not that funny. And the movie can get pretty boring sometimes, especially the scenes where it takes place in live action. The stuff with Michael Jordan and his family isn't particularly interesting. The stuff with the fat friend played by the same guy who did Newman from Seinfeld isn't funny, and I feel like he's just there for the hell of it and he doesn't bring anything to the table. I guess it's okay to share this movie to your kids if you want to shut them up for about an hour, but sharing this movie to your adults, I can guarantee you that they're not going to be entertained, especially the ones that haven't grew up in the 90s. Overall, it's not the worst film ever made, but it's certainly a pretty weak family film, and I wouldn't say avoid it because it is worth watching for one thing and one thing only: the Space Jam intro! For the movie itself, it gets 2 stars, but because it has that really good opening, it gets at least 3.
Ah yes, Superman animated. That show fucking owns, people! Why do I say that? Let me just say that the plot lines for Superman anime, I thought they were brilliant. The animation was excellent for its time, and hell, even the action scenes which they showed with Superman fighting Lex Luthor and his henchmen, I thought they were awesome. I thought they were fucking epic and in some cases brutal. In 1999, people, Titus, a company that has a very shitty reputation for making games on pretty much various consoles, decides to make a Superman game for the N64. Doesn't that sound awesome? No, it doesn't! Why do I say that? Because it's one of the worst fucking games I've ever played, and it's a good thing that I did not play this game in my fucking childhood. That's right, people. I'm talking about the abysmal Superman 64. And knowing we're talking about an abysmal pile of shit, we're not going to talk about the story today. Because it's basically Superman in a virtual world, people, where Lex Luthor has trapped him in, and he has to save Lois Lane and a couple of his friends. Yeah, very generic plot line to a company that basically made this game at the last fucking minute! And now, time to bash this game with unholy fucking wrath! We see a nice little title sequence of Superman and who the hell is that Brainiac? Looks like they're trying to duke it out. And yes, people, this is the best part of the fucking game. Literally, it's the best part of the fucking game! And we see, I don't know, Lex Luthor exporting Lois Lane and a couple random characters into a machine, and yeah, they're trapped in a virtual world, and Superman has to save them! Oh no! And this is where the game really falls the fuck apart, people! Superman has to fly through motherfucking rings! And you can only afford to miss 4 of them, or else you have to go back to the fucking start of the goddamn level. And the time limit doesn't help much either. And not even these friggin' overly sensitive goddamn controls, they don't help either. This makes the game very, very difficult in normal mode. Seriously, people, I said it, and I'm gonna say it again. This is on normal mode, not on hard mode. And let me go ahead and say to Titus, what kind of fucking drugs, as I say in my many of reviews, what kind of fucking drugs were you on when you thought that for Lex Luthor's brilliant master plan to destroy Superman with fucking kryptonite rings that he flies through, he doesn't get killed, people. He doesn't get fucking killed. And I died. Motherfucker! Now, if you do manage to get past the rings of hell, you have to go through a mission in order to complete the level. Now, this mission, people, as far as control-wise, is fucking unresponsive in some cases. They go from being too sensitive to being unresponsive like the fucking controls have a mind of their own. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. And if you manage to get past the fucking mission, guess what, people? More tedious Star Fox rip-off bullshit. You have to fly through fucking rings. Doesn't that sound fun? No, it doesn't. Because if I have to fly through fucking kryptonite-coated rings again, I swear to God, I am going to blow my fucking brains out and kill myself with goddamn motherfucking kryptonite! That's it. That is fucking it as far as playing it on normal mode. Screw you, normal mode, you're too fucking difficult! Let's play it on easy and see if the gameplay's actually better!
Then there's no time to waste.
Wait, what the hell is this? No rings?! Are you fucking telling me that this game goes from being too fucking difficult to being a goddamn motherfucking joke? Oh my fucking God! Jesus Christ. Fuck! This game's inconsistency is driving me fucking insane, from the goddamn controls and now to the difficult. Titus, you are fucking dead! Let's fast forward this shit so I actually can complete some of the game! So, we're underneath a submarine underwater. Okay. And let me tell you something, people. I don't know what the fuck to do in this part. I tried figuring out for at least 2 hours on this shit. 2 fucking hours! And I couldn't figure out what the fuck to do. But if I actually went through this part, if I knew what the hell to do with the computer chip, I bet you it's the same redundant bullshit! Where we have to either fly through rings, or fly to get to the fucking Superman logo, or basically go out there, complete a mission, fly through the ass, complete another mission, fly through ends. The redundancy of this fucking game is driving me fucking insane! This ending better be fucking worth it after the friggin' shit-fest torture that I've endured through the friggin' gameplay! It better be worth something. Wait, what the fuck did I just watch? Are you fucking telling me that this game is nothing more than a goddamn dream? Are you telling me that it's nothing more than a fucking simulation? Oh my gentle fucking Jesus! Lex Luthor, torment Superman now! And that's why I paid you money up front, asshole.
And now you will tell me why your game's ending sucks so much fucking ass!
Never.
Then I guess I will eat your delicious peanut butter! So delicious, so fresh roasted! I got a fucking orgy in my mouth! Oh yes!
The graphics, people? Oh my fucking god, are they horrible! They are pure, unadulterated, utter shit. As far as 3D texture support is concerned, for a 5th generation game, I might add, not just a Saturn, not just a PSX, people, I'm talking about overall a 5th generation game, they look terrible! Why? Because everything as far as from the buildings to the sky and hell, even to the fucking ground, it's either too blocky or it's too flat. And the character models, that's the only thing that Titus got right as far as graphics are concerned. At least they have some sort of shape in them. Now, the color scheme, people, of course is bland. Of course it's fucking bland. All I see is turquoise, green, and gray in this game. That's what I see, and maybe some brown. That's basically it for Superman 64. And yes, people, I know that this shows pink in the fucking sky. But the worst part about the graphics are concerned is the fucking animation. Seriously. If you look at Superman when he swims, quote, quote, in the fucking water, he doesn't swim. He flies underwater! Way to go, Titus! It tells to me that your fucking graphic designers were too goddamn lazy. It tells to me that they probably spent most of their time fucking napping. I've seen better animation coming from SMP1 on the NES! An 8-bit game, people, versus something from a 64-bit system. Wow. Just wow. Super Mario Bros. I don't usually say this, people. Pound Superman 64 big time. The sound, people, as far as voices are concerned, especially coming from Superman, is very annoying. Not the fact that Superman sounds decent, but the fact that he says the same goddamn asinine thing. This is worse than Pokemon Puzzle League. Remember, people, in Pokemon Puzzle League, you would hear the Pokemon characters' anime voices basically say,
Pika Pika Pikachu!
or Squirtle Squirtle, Squirtle Squirtle, or Bulbasaur Bulbasaur, Wheezing Wheezing, you know, shit like that. And you heard the anime characters such as Ash and Team Rocket, you know, get annoying when they said their 2 or 3 lines over and over and over again. Yeah, people, it's worse than that. And also, the fact that whenever you miss a ring, people, in normal mode, it sounds like somebody taking a shit. I've heard worse, I've heard better fucking sound effects coming from the Atari 2600. And the music, this is the only redeeming factor to this game. However, it doesn't fit Superman! It doesn't fit Batman! It doesn't fit any DC comic! And overall, people, the sound is annoying! Superman 64, people, is indeed one of the worst fucking games I have ever played in my life. This ain't as bad as Action 52, but it's mighty, mighty close. And I refuse to review Action 52, people, because there's too many goddamn reviews on it. Now, back to Superman 64. If I ever buy a cartridge from you, I am seriously going to annihilate the fucking cartridge, whether it be via knives, via burning the fucking cartridge, or getting a goddamn shotgun and using it as a fucking target. I don't care what I use. That game, the fucking producers of the game should be fucking ashamed of themselves for making this pile of shit. The goddamn procrastinators. They spent maybe a week on it, by the looks of this. If I ever find the head person of Titus, or what was Titus, I am going to go at their fucking house in the middle of the night and kill them in their fucking sleep. The person of Titus needs to be taught a fucking lesson, and that is not license shitty fucking games. I know, people, it's a Superman game, and what do you expect from a Superman game? You expect shitty quality, but not this bad. You know what I'm gonna give this game, people? A fucking 0 out of 10!
Here is the battle review all you lot wanted to see. Sonic Heroes vs Shadow the Hedgehog. Now, just to clear up, because the PS2 version of Sonic Heroes is abysmal, I'll be using the far superior GameCube version, and to make it a fair comparison, I will also be comparing it to Shadow on the GameCube. The games will be compared in the following categories: story, gameplay, graphics, sound, and boss battles. So, let's get this battle started. Start off with the story. Both games have distinct differences in the way that they tell their stories. Sonic Heroes is split into 4 stories for 4 teams. Team Sonic have to try and stop Eggman once again. Team Dark involves Shadow wanting to find out about who he is and Omega desiring to meet his maker. Team Rose try to find Froggy and Chocola, and Team Chaotix to get a job, and towards the end all the teams meet up to fight Metal Sonic. Shadow the Hedgehog involves Shadow suffering from amnesia with haunting memories of his past, but when aliens invade, a mysterious stranger known as Black Doom claims to know all about him. Shadow then has to get the Chaos Emeralds to find out about his past, and the only thing guiding him is who can he trust. Yeah, by this it's obvious which game has the superior story. Sonic Heroes stories were essentially just a reason for the gameplay to happen, and after the epic Sonic Adventure 2 battle, we get this? Shadow the Hedgehog, on the other hand, at least makes more room for character development and does a better job at keeping the player engaged. Plus, there are a grand total of 11 endings. All I hear now, though, is complaints about the last story making the other endings pointless, and this was never really brought up much until Some Call Me Johnny mentioned it in his review. Think about it this way though, in order for the series' storyline to continue, there has to be at least one true ending for the games to follow on to, otherwise people will just end up getting confused in the later games as to why did the character follow this ending. But whether or not you found this to be a big deal though, Shadow's story is still better written, as Sonic Heroes suffers from some truly atrocious lines, but I'll get more onto that later. So the first point goes to Shadow. Its story was deeper, characters are more interesting, and it doesn't have as much cringeworthy dialogue. Much like the story, the graphics for both games go for slightly different looks to them. Sonic Heroes has more bright and vibrant designs like sunny beaches, futuristic cities, and neon casinos. There's not great originality in the environments, as we have seen most of these locations from one Sonic game or another, but they are still pleasing to the eye. There aren't as many cutscenes this time around, but there's a much greater abundance of CGI cutscenes than before, so the animation is more crisp and the lip syncing is better. The in-game frame rate is a lot more robust than the PS2 version as well. Shadow the Hedgehog obviously goes for a more darker tone to it and has more desolate locations that look like they're under war, and the designs feel more unique than Sonic Heroes. Whilst the tone is dark, there are also some bright levels like the digital circuit. There are more cutscenes in this game, but most of them are game cutscenes, and there are even fewer CGI cutscenes than Sonic Heroes. When you do get a CGI cutscene, they do look very nice, but sadly few cutscenes are CGI, and the game cutscenes at times have some choppy animation and dodgy lip syncing. For this, I'll give the point to Sonic Heroes. The visuals in that game are just so much more vibrant and colourful. I did like the dark atmosphere with Shadow the Hedgehog, but aside from the city levels and a level in the air fleet, there wasn't a great feel of the dark story to it. And whilst it has more unique locations than Sonic Heroes, they do reuse similar designs for levels, and the levels just look more appealing in Sonic Heroes. Tough call, but Heroes only just edges it. As expected, the games also go for different directions in their musical style. Sonic Heroes goes for more upbeat music, mostly rock, but others like Frog Forest and Bingo Highway also complement their level well. My personal favourite level theme is Bullet Station. I also really like the super catchy main theme, as well as Team Dark's awesome techno theme. Shadow the Hedgehog goes for a more darker sounding tone to it. These music tracks are not as upbeat as Sonic Heroes, but there are some great tunes that emphasise the dark tone well. For me though, Sonic Heroes has much more memorable music. I found nearly all of the tracks a joy to listen to. And whilst Shadow has some good level themes, it also has some fairly generic themes that won't interest you very much. Also, aside from the main theme, I Am All of Me by Crush 40, I found the rest of the vocal songs unmemorable in comparison to Sonic Heroes. However, in terms of voice acting, I might have to go for Shadow the Hedgehog. Whilst with the exception of Tails, Big and Metal Sonic, most of the voices in Sonic Heroes aren't bad, but the writing here is the real culprit. Throughout the story, the dialogue is filled with Sonic and friends saying some really embarrassing lines.
Didn't you know? We have a date with Eggman too.
Is that so? Well then, it'll be a date to die for.
Hey, that's my line.
Sonic, you have literally never once said that line. While some may argue that it gives the game a more cheesy appeal, I rarely found it funny and more cringeworthy than anything else. At least as Shadow the Hedgehog, the tone of the writing is more engaging and steers clear of this overdose of cheesiness. Here, the 4Kids voice actors are their usual mixed bag. While Sonic is no longer spouting ridiculous lines, his voice could have done with more emotion. but to me, Jason Griffith was the perfect voice for Shadow, as he was just so dark and mysterious like his character.
If he says he knows the truth about who I am, then like it or not, I have to believe him. The only way I'm gonna get the secrets to my past is to get those Chaos Emeralds.
Other voices range from annoying, to passable, to really good, plus the introduction of my favourite voice actor in the Sonic series, Mike Pollock. So both games will get a point here. Sonic Heroes for its upbeat and catchy music, but Shadow the Hedgehog for better voice acting. For boss battles, I'm just going to be blunt. The bosses were one of the weakest aspects of Sonic Heroes. There were really only 3 types of bosses: the usual Eggman robots, a battle against another team, and a wave of enemies. The problem with these battles though is there's zero strategy. For the Eggman robots, I mostly just use power on Egghawk, speed on Egg Albatross, and flight on Egg Emperor. And if you're struggling with these fights, you can just keep attacking until your Team Blast gauge is full. The team battles try to incorporate a rock paper scissors formula, but I found it best to use speed and just do this. This is mindless attack spamming crap at its worst. Honestly, the best boss battles are the enemy waves, because at least they had some level of strategy as to which character would be best to use and who to level up. That's really sad that the best boss battles aren't even bosses at all, just regular enemies. The only hard boss is Egg Emperor, and he's the only battle which I would label cheap. He does not give you a fair fight, as he often likes to throw attacks at points where you can't dodge them, like when you're in the air, totally defenseless, and knock you off the edge. This boss can go to hell. With Shadow, again, there are 3 types of bosses you fight: aliens, gun vehicles, and Eggman. Whilst these fights are mostly short, they at least have more strategy to beating them than just spamming, and are more varied and fun. As far as final bosses go, Shadow is the definite winner. Metal Overlord pretty much revolves around building up your attacks, then keep team blasting him, and he's really easy. Devil Doom, on the other hand, is a souped up Black Doom tearing apart the city and using its debris as a shield. This fight is both intense, epic, and a lot more enjoyable. Sure, the rest of Shadow's bosses aren't great, but they're gold compared to the crap in Sonic Heroes. And now we come to the decider, the gameplay. 2 points for whoever wins this round. Let's start with Sonic Heroes. I mentioned how the story fell flat compared to the Sonic Adventure games, but it is just a Sonic game, and story really doesn't matter as long as the game is fun. This game adopts a unique team-based style of gameplay, where you can control 3 characters at once. The speed character is the fast runner and attacker, who can do the homing attack, cause a whirlwind, jump off walls, dash along trail of rings, and do Rocket XL, aka the most useless move in the game. That aside, all these skills mean they're usually the characters you use most often. Power characters are the strong combat types who can beat enemies more effectively, and they can also do a triangle glide across fans. Lastly is the flight character, who can fly and shoot the other characters at enemies. These are the characters I like to use least, as they're sluggish and have very floaty jumping control. Your characters can also be leveled up throughout the levels to give them stronger attacks. Play control is a little loose compared to the Sonic Adventure games, and there is sometimes the problem of the light dash and attack both being the B button. But the buttons still respond well, and they're much better than the PS2 version. The game has a total of 4 teams, which all have their differences. Team Sonic's gameplay is speed oriented, Team Dark are more combat involved, Team Rose have shorter levels, and Team Chaotix have mission based levels. This does mean you have to play through the game with all 4 teams, and even though their levels have slight differences, they can still feel too samey at times. Particularly Team Sonic and Team Dark's levels can feel very identical. By this you'd probably assume that I like Team Chaotix's levels the best, as they have more variety to them. Well, actually no, this team is in fact my least favourite to play as, because the tasks given, whether it's finding hermit crabs, collecting rings, or defeating enemies, if you go through the level and miss just one, you have to go back to the beginning of the level and search again. I also didn't really like the stealth levels where you have to not get detected by the enemies, mostly because I just prefer to use brute force when it comes to Sonic games. These levels are often tedious. Team Dark were probably my favourite team to play as, because they're the most powerful, and the high amount of enemies in the levels means it's easier to level up your characters. The levels in this game are really big and go back to the formula of the classic games with 2 acts and then a boss battle. I like how the levels are designed, and it makes good use of all character types without over or underusing any particular type. The other thing that's great about the levels is that each area has its own unique gimmick to it to keep them fresh, whether it's the casino's pinball tables or the frogs that cause rain to grow plants. It's nice to see the levels have variation to them, and my favourite level is Egg Fleet. There is linearity to the gameplay, as it is really just A to B, but some levels have both simple ways to get through and daredevil ways which get you more points, so risk rewarding is incorporated here as well. The game also brings back special stages where you have to chase for Chaos Emeralds, and you need all of these to unlock the final story. The game also has a multiplayer option which can consist of racing, battles and various other things. It's okay, but these matches can often be too brief, and most of the options are locked and you have to get emblems to unlock them. You can get emblems by beating the regular levels for the first time, but you can also try the B levels which are different for each character. For Team Sonic it's racing to the end in an allotted time, for Team Dark it's defeating 100 enemies, for Team Rose it's collecting 200 rings, and Team Chaotix is pretty much just hard mode for their regular missions. Some feel really tasking, and getting all the A ranks can be quite frustrating. And unfortunately, frustrating is something you'll frequently describe this game as. For one, the controls are fine, except for the camera. If you're using the analog stick, be careful not to push up, or else you'll go into this awkward first person view, and it can make surroundings hard to see and get a good angle on. I also really hated the casino stages of the pinball tables, as I felt virtually no control over the characters in ball format. It's like I can kinda control it, but more often than not they just go wherever they want, and it's all over the place. The rail grinding was also piss poor, as certain levels required you to jump from rail to rail, but if you're not careful your character will just jump off the rail into a bottomless pit below, or change directions? Sorry, but when I'm having to switch between flight and speed to make sure I don't run into bad game design, that just ruins things for me, and also shit like this I just can't let slide. But the absolute worst though are the special stages. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything here, these stages are fucking atrocious, and the main issue here is the controls are absolutely mangled. Sometimes movement can go twitchy, and other times your characters won't move despite heavy forcing of the analog stick. Other times the character just moves of its own accord, and even at times gets stuck and comes to a complete stop. These special stages aren't even hard, and it's absolutely disgraceful that said difficulty is from bad game design and not user error. One last complaint, why do the tutorials of Team Rose have to be mandatory? I get that Team Rose is a beginner team, but couldn't you have an option to just skip the tutorial? I guess Sonic Team were just really worried people would be overwhelmed by the vast amount of characters. But I found the game easy to get to grips with, and throughout the levels it explains how the characters work anyways, so what's the point? Those gripes aside though, Sonic Heroes can still be a fun game. Its unique premise and expansive level design hold it together nicely enough. Shadow the Hedgehog's gameplay is unlike any other Sonic game you'll play. The gameplay has a more non-linear format, where you start off in Westopolis, but you have the choice of 3 missions to do. Neutral, which involves getting to the goal ring. Hero, where you assist the hero characters with their tasks, like killing all black aliens or rescuing certain characters. And Dark, where you assist Dark characters in taking out all humans or setting off all bombs, and whichever mission you do, you take a different route in the story path. Similar to Team Chaotix and Sonic Heroes with its mission setup, however it's executed much better here. When you get to the end of the level, and if you miss just one target, you can teleport via checkpoints, which saves you having to go back to the beginning of the level. That and your support characters offer assistance, so it's much less tasking to do these missions. Plus, if you don't like a certain mission, you don't have to do it, you can just do another one instead. And that's really this game's biggest strong point, you can do the levels however you want. You have to play through the game 10 times to get all the endings, but each playthrough can end up being a whole different experience, so it never feels boring. The worst really is having to play through Westopolis 10 times, but you don't have to do the same mission every time. You can get all endings by repeating one of the missions just 4 times, and that's okay. I'd rather just have one level be repetitive than the whole game. The gameplay also introduces guns to the mix. This actually helps flesh out the game, as it now makes it easier to plough through enemies, plus there's a great assortment of different types of weapons, like standard guns, rocket launchers and lasers. As there's a huge choice for what weapons to use, whichever one you choose will depend on personal preference, but certain weapons are best used for certain scenarios. The weapons were overall well implemented and rarely did it feel like it was breaking the flow of the game. Shadow can also commandeer certain vehicles as well, which is okay. The air saucers come in useful for getting over dangerous terrain, the Black Hawks are useful for getting to out of reach places, and the gun jump vehicles are useful for jumping to higher ground. The cars aren't great as they're slower than Shadow, but they're useful for minor situations where you don't want to take damage. The only vehicle that's completely useless is the bike, but apart from that the vehicles do come in handy, and all those who say they were useless clearly haven't played the game the right way. Play control for me was much improved over Sonic Heroes. Shadow here moves more smoothly than before, and he slows down when jumping, which makes jumping precision much easier. He can also run for a bit whilst doing the wall jump, and the rail grinding is a massive improvement, as he can now jump from rail to rail with ease, and it's smooth and responsive. There's also less problems involving the same button being used for multiple things. The worst that happens is you do a minor spin dash when trying to light dash, but this really isn't that problematic like the last game. I also like that when you get hit, instead of losing all your rings, you now only lose 10 rings, and the camera controls are also much better, as it's easier to move around and zoom in and out without having any of that stupid first person mode crap. Each level also has 5 keys hidden throughout, but when you collect them all they unlock a special door which can usually lead to something cool, like more weapons, a vehicle, or even a handy shortcut. Most are fun, but some make you wonder why you'd even need them in the first place. Either way, it gives you great incentive to explore the levels in greater depth. So far this all seems like a pretty package, but it's not without its annoyances. For one, I found the flashback levels aboard the Ark far too tedious, as it has maze-like design that's really confusing to navigate, and because everywhere looks the same, it's easy to get lost, plus it has probably the world's slowest lifts. The controls I praise for being good, but there is a learning curve to them, as at first they can feel slippery and some may find it hard to adapt to the style. I found it fine, but still something I felt needed to be brought up. The game also has a multiplayer option like in Sonic Heroes, which is sadly even worse. There's only 3 maps and all you do is kill the other player once. It proves to be a very mediocre offering. Even though you have to play through the game 10 times, you actually don't need to unlock every level. But if you do want to unlock every level, there are certain missions you'll have to play at some point if you want to unlock them. If I had to pick between this and the PS2 version, I would honestly favour the PS2 version. I found that had better camera controls, but this is really personal preference, as I find the right analog stick more comfortable than the C stick, plus I think the button layout is more clean on the PS2 version. One last thing to say about Shadow is that beating it is so much more satisfying than beating Sonic Heroes, because in that game when you beat it it just says try another story or get all A ranks, but in Shadow you unlock the Shadow Rifle that beats all enemies in one shot. Sweet! Now you see why I don't mind the last story. I like it for gameplay reasons. At the end of the day, Shadow the Hedgehog is open, diverse, polished, and with wicked high replay value. This is precisely the reason why I think the gameplay shines. So now, over to the battle boards for the results. Shadow the Hedgehog is the winner! Silence! Now, would you let me explain my reasoning? I think both games had interesting concepts to them, but Shadow had much better execution. Sonic Heroes felt patchy in areas and was too repetitive, but Shadow has the clever way of choosing your way to make it more interesting to play again. Plus the combat was better, the controls were less fiddly, and it had much better boss battles. There's a reason as to why this was the first game that got me into the Sonic series, and now I've given my reason, I'm sticking with them. So hopefully you can respect my views on the game and see where I'm coming from. So thanks for watching my battle review.
As a child, I remember, and I actually freaking remember that I remember playing this game. I was just a little kid, and mainly I just felt like I was playing a good game. But many years have passed, and now looking at it, I thought, how dumb of a little kid. How dumb was I asked myself. So I want to have revenge by reviewing this game and destroying it at the fucking same time. Well, I'll try to destroy it at the end if I can. Okay, let's start this piece of shit now. Wow, that's a real fucking nice opening. Alright, here's the plot. Bowser wants to use the time machine to get all the most important artifacts in the world. So he steals them from the owners and asks Mario to stop him from his world domination of having his own museum in... Wait. If I was a little kid, where the heck are the words? Wait a minute. And how the hell did Bowser get a time machine? The whole plot doesn't make fucking sense. Jeez. It's probably one of the worst storylines I've ever heard since Sonic Rider Zero Gravity. Oh yeah, like Bowser's that fat, just like that one kid from McDonald's. This is what happens when you eat too much. You look like this. Oh god, can I just start the game now? I feel like I'm going through a hemorrhoid state. Alright, there we go. There's a little Mario doing his little get-up thing. Alright, here's how the gameplay works. You have 5 artifacts, and each of them you must return to the owner. And what I'm trying to do now is trying to get the item. You usually do it by pressing the A button. But no! You must use the X button, which is probably the most useless button on the Super Nintendo. Alright, on each item you use, this is your homework. That's right. They mixed the basics of an educational game into a Mario game. Thus, it equals suckage. Ugh. Think about this. A kid isn't gonna figure this out. There is just no fucking way in Monkey Balls of Infinity they're gonna find this out. And in fact, no mean to rip off Rizwar, but dear God, this is why the aliens never visit us. It's like they figure out this is the most well-known educational source of this planet, and they said to us, "Your planet sucks. We will never visit you ever again." But back to the point. Gameplay is pretty boring. All you have to do is fill the blanks, and this is like your homework. Yes, it's like your homework. And if you can't figure the clues out, you must go to that specific time, which is on the top of your journal, and you ask questions all around just to know what the fuck you're supposed to do and what answers you're supposed to fill out. Once you do that, you go to the original owner and you return the item, blah blah blah. Then you just simply use this time machine thingy, in which you can go home. But I don't want to spoil it too much. But seriously, combining the basics of education into a video game, this is what they were thinking. They think that those two possibilities will equal fun. Sure, education, it's good for you, but if you put it in mathematics and put it on a video game, you get one of the worst fucking titles you've ever done. There's several good games like Oregon. I don't find any problems with those games, but come on, Mario in an educational based video game. That's probably one of the most deceptive concepts I've ever heard in my entire life. And to be honest, this mode, I actually had fun in it. Now, is there something wrong here? I must have been on, I don't know, peanut butter or something, I don't know. But seriously, in this mode, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. But here's what I heard from Wizward. You have to collect all the mushrooms all around the fucking sea. Once you do that, go to the whirlpool and you'll be up in the time princess. It's pretty simple. Well, not for a little kid, but please ask yourself, if a little kid bought this as a Mario game, is a little kid gonna know what the fuck to do, and also know what to do with a fucking time machine? They don't know. They don't know this stuff. Unless a 5th grader has an IQ of 265 or something like that. And this is bullshit. I'm using an emulator, and the mushrooms keeps disappearing. This is why I ran out of time bonuses. And this is bullshit. I can't. Oh, God. Look at this. This is not fun. I just missed one of the mushrooms. Oh, this one. Oh, fuck, I just missed it. God damn it. Oh, there we go. Now we go. Whee! And here we are. Oh, God. Well, this is what you do. Yeah, you just ask people around, and you're supposed to take notes. That way, you'll fill in the blanks and know what the fuck to do. So, I just got one fucking blank that fell out. Now I don't know what the fuck it is. Oh wait, correction. I stand corrected. There's 2 blanks. Ugh. Fuck. But seriously, kids doesn't know this shit. Only like, a 5th grader or a middle school grader, they wouldn't know this stuff. But they would not, even though that a 5th grader would figure this out, they would not enjoy this fucking piece of shit. Besides, video games are meant to be fun. Putting Mario in it is not fun, because Mario is meant to be a platformer, while knowledge is mainly good for you, only for school. This is a perfect example. Instead of the public school teaching you, no, let video games nor television teach you about education. This is fucking retarded. Alright, I'm just gonna skip this fucking bullshit. Alright, let's talk about the things about gameplay. Gameplay is just so boring as hell. This is all you fucking do. Get one of the items, fill the blanks, and if necessary, go use your time machine of doom. Go to that time in which the item is ascended to, or where it came from, in layman's terms. Take notes, fill in all the blanks, go to the original order, give them the item, and return in time by using the Death Star. And then you do the same thing, over and over and over again. So you may ask me, is this all you do? Well, yes. This is all you do. There's no Princess Peach, there's no Luigi, there's not even Yoshi. All you see is Mario and Koopa and some of the Koopa links. That's it. And the worst part, you don't see any of the enemies. None of them. Where are the Goombas? Where are the Koopa Troopas? Where the hell are they? It's like, the developers think, oh, action's stupid, education's fun, there's the Death Star, and I want to go home. La 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 la. Oh god, password. This is one negativity. Why isn't there a save feature? Are kids gonna remember this? Fuck no. How about putting a save feature, you son of a bitch? Ugh, I'm sorry, but this is just bullshit to me. Ugh. Alright, sound is just fucking terrible. And another thing, why is their list of answers so fucking long? God, can they drag this any more? But the sound, holy shit. Your eardrums will bleed in the next 5 minutes. I mean, I swear to God, it just will. And I'm tired of this. So guess what? We're gonna go cheat! Alright. Welcome back to T4TV. I feel like I'm playing a god-awful game. I'm just beating that one part. Ugh. So, anyways, got all the items. Go in there. Yay! I'm beating it, this god-awful piece of I can't believe this. Okay. Let's do this. Has it been 2 years? Holy shit. Can't believe it. Well, at least this is the last line of the fucking game. Alright. I just got it all. Yes. I did it. Oh, son of a bitch! I'm a motherfucking! This. Okay, let's try this again. This is the very last fucking level. Who thought of this? 15 fucking items. Oh, my brain's gonna go crazy. This is fucking retarded! Okay. Get ready. Ready. Okay. Ballard, come back, you motherfucker!
Failure!
Come on, you couldn't even be a boss battle. What the fuck? Oh my god. Alright. Bowser. Yeah, he looks awful. Like, what the fuck? The background looks so stupid. Graphics are just so mediocre at best. Ooh, we got stumped. Let's try that again.
Do you like waffles? Yeah, we like waffles. Do you like pancakes? Yeah, we like pancakes.
Well, that was fun. That was my revenge. But seriously, there's just so many I'm sorry, thongs. But anyway, there's just so many things wrong with this game. I mean, first of all, gameplay is boring as hell. Graphics suck. And finally, the music just fucking sucks. It's like your Q-tip being placed inside your ear all the fucking way. It's just scratching it over and over and over again. God. It's just gotta fucking awful. And the fun factor is not fun at all. It's just not fun. Putting education, which is bad for you, but it's good for you, plus video games, it's fun as hell, but for some people it's bad for you. It will equal the worst fucking idea ever since New Coke. Ugh. I have nothing to say about this game rather than this. You are going to burn!
As all my faithful little students should know, I was challenged to a review-off, if you will, and I'm going up against 116 randomness to see who is the best at reviewing video games. So with that said, here we are today with only my third video game review ever, and today I will be looking at none other than the epitome of SNES RPGs. That is the time-traveling adventure known as Super Doctor Who. Well, Doctor Who if you replace the Doctor with the red-haired 16-year-old boy from medieval times who uses a sword, is mute, and fights monsters. Obviously, I'm actually talking about Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger was originally released for the Super Nintendo on March 11th, 1995, and was met with raging reviews, and winning quite a few awards over the previous years. This game is still, to this day, considered one of the greatest games to be released on the Super Nintendo, or even the best RPG to be released on the SNES, and one of the greatest RPGs of all time. But you have to ask yourself, why? Why is this game so loved by the fans of the RPG genre? Could it be the storyline, the combat system, the graphics, the musical score, or could it be that there was a half-naked blonde cave woman who looks really good in fur? The answer would be all of the above, especially the cave woman. The story follows the adventures of Chrono, a young man from Gardena, who gets thrown into the fray when a charming young lady, better known as Marl, gets magically transported to the past, after he bashes into her to say hi, of course, and he ends up jumping in to find her. Chrono must battle his way through the past, present, and future timelines of his world to eventually stop a crisis that sends the world into decay and puts every human on the endangered species list. The humans also apparently get dumber after this happens, proving that Idiocracy is more of a documentary of the future and not a comedic film. I'm not going to tell you the full details of the story behind Chrono Trigger for the sole fact that I don't believe in giving spoilers. And because the storyline that is woven in Chrono Trigger is so vast and amazing that it is really something that needs to be experienced and not heard. Though if you really want, I can tell you, you just have to ask. Now, throughout Chrono's adventures, he meets many different characters, including his childhood friend and mechanical genius, Luca, the young tomboy with attitude, Marl, the futuristic technological miracle, Robo, who also has one of the greatest themes in the game, by the way. Robo's theme is so freaking sweet, he's made of metal, yes he is. He has a heart unlike the Tin Man from the fucking Wizard of Oz. The young man who was turned into a frog by a dark sorcerer that is simply named Frog, but any true fan of the game will actually give him his real name each time that they play it. Plus, he has the best character theme song in the game. I will be victorious over you, I'm a frog. And I know how to use a sword, yes I do, oh yes I do. I will be victorious over you, yes your blood will flow freely from your body. After I slash you, yes I will. I'll cut your fucking head off, cause I'm a frog. I once was a man whose name was Glenn, until the fucking sorcerer hit me. The smoking hot cave woman with bad English that proves brains don't matter too much when you can throw a dinosaur halfway across the room, Ayla, and last but definitely not least, the dark sorcerer and quite possibly one of the coolest characters to ever be created for anything. After all, guys, come on, he uses a scythe, Magus, who also has a pretty kick-ass theme song. I'm a sorcerer with magic. Turn that guy into a frog. I'm a badass with a song. Now, the wide array of playable characters, while it can be a negative in some games, such as Final Fantasy VI, it actually works. The writers spent enough time developing these characters to have very specific personalities and mannerisms. There are even scenes in the game that will change depending on the character you have with you at the time. Such as when you first meet Ayla. Marl gets a little pissed off thinking that she is trying to make a move on her man. The level of focus and development show that the development team, also better known as the Dream Team at the time, took a lot of care in creating Chrono Trigger and the way the characters, including NPCs, react, making the world seem alive in a sense which truly gave you the ability to become more immersed than in any other RPG on the market at the time. Well, RPGs that were released on consoles. Now, you might think that I'm done talking about storyline, but that is where you would be wrong. Imagine, if you will, side quests for each character in the game that develop them even more, such as saving Luca's mom from being paralyzed. The fact that the story can change slightly depending on the choices you make. The fact that you can choose whether two main characters live or die. Chrono Trigger is truly an open book. A narrative you write as you play. This was something that was not around when Chrono Trigger was released. Branching storylines, changing dialogue, the ability to completely change events in the game, these were all new concepts, and it blew our freaking minds. Though I can remember the most influential and mind-blowing part of the game very vividly. Imagine, if you will, that you are me. I know that's kind of scary, but please do it anyway. Shortly after this game was released, and you finally beat it. You are sitting at school talking with your friends who also played and beat the game, and you just so happen to state, "Wow, what did you guys think of that ending? That was pretty tubular." Yes, I said tubular at that age. Which in turn they would respond saying, "What is wrong with you, home-sliced goober cake?" Yeah, I know, we were a bunch of losers. That ain't the ending, my brother. This is the ending. Then 5 minutes later, after arguing and bashing your best friend's head into a locker, you realized, holy crap, this game has more than one ending! Yes, Chrono Trigger effectively introduced multiple endings to RPGs and gaming in general. To top it off, there are 12 of them. So that means you get to play the game at least 12 times trying to find them all. Today, I would suggest GameFAQs, but we didn't have that then. So I have probably beat Chrono Trigger well over 30 times. Most of them from my childhood and trying to find the different endings. Hell, there is even an ending where you do nothing more than talk to the creators of the game. Now, well, if you will allow me, and I'm really not giving you much of a choice here, I would like to shift gears and take a look at another aspect of Chrono Trigger that is obviously very important. That would be the combat system that is used. Up to the release of Chrono Trigger, fans had seen battle screens typical to Dragon Warrior or Final Fantasy. Completely motionless character sprites with a very minimal amount of movement. Chrono Trigger took that style of combat out behind a barn, beat it, shot it, set it on fire, and then pissed on its grave. What we had was a battle screen that took place right on the field, as well as the characters were constantly moving, making them seem more real. There was full motion animations for each spell that was cast, and each was a different animation. And to top it all off, the characters would actually hit what you told them to attack. The last part was the biggest selling point, for me at least. While I love the classic Final Fantasies, don't get me wrong, at the time, I always wished my character would just run across the screen and actually hit the monster you told him to attack. Seeing this actually happen in Chrono Trigger was definitely a kick-ass moment. It gives you that pleasure of knowing that you actually hit something and actually got to see it happen, much like the joy that you can get in the Zelda game by watching your sword slash through an enemy each time you attack. To build on this, with the battles actually taking place on the field, there was no battle loading screen, such as in Final Fantasy. This made battles seem as if they were happening in real time, and it made the combat flow that much better with the exploration sections of the game. The way they were able to get by without battle loading screens, though, was how enemy encounters actually happened. No longer was it a random encounter where you take a number of predefined steps and are magically sucked into battle, but you actually had to touch your opponent first to initiate combat with them. Chalk all of these items together and you have quite possibly the most enjoyable and innovative combat system for any RPG ever released on the SNES. Next, I want to cover the graphics really quick. Now let me give my thoughts on the graphics for this little masterpiece in a very few words. Goddamn, this is pretty! But what else can you expect when the person who came up with the character designs and was the lead artist for the game was none other than the legendary Akira Toriyama himself? That's right, the reason Chrono looks so much like Goku is because, well, they were designed by the same person. The world is lush, with no area left to be plain or dull. The level of detail and design for the environment alone is, well, awe-inspiring to say the least. Every timeline you went to just felt, well, right for lack of a better term. The Stone Age truly felt like the Stone Age, and the post-apocalyptic future truly gave you a sense of depression for what had happened. But in my honest opinion, the most well-designed area of the game, and the most inspiring section would be none other than Magus's castle. This place truly felt like the house of a man who worshipped the dark arts and reveled in the power that it bestowed upon him. Truly, Chrono Trigger is a sight to behold. The last area I have to touch base on is the score and soundtrack. Now, let me tell you, there are quite a few amazing video game scores from the SNES. Super Metroid, Castlevania 4, Final Fantasy VI, and Demon's Crest, to just name a few. But each of these pale in comparison to Chrono Trigger. But that is what you get when you team up Yasunori Misuda and Nobu Uematsu, who are two of the greatest composers for video games to ever exist. If I had to make a comparison, Mitsuo-san would have to be Beethoven, and Uematsu-san would have to be Jimi freaking Hendrix. The score was used in a way that set the mood for each area in the game in a way that, once again, pulled you into it and made you become one with Chrono Trigger. They even went as far to make themes for each of the characters, and I've already told you my favorite 3 of those. Now, to be honest, I think that the theme for Chrono Trigger should go down in history as one of the best and most iconic video game themes ever, right alongside the Legend of Zelda theme and the Crystal theme from Final Fantasy. The score was so freaking good that it even inspired some guys to make a symphony out of it. Check it out by searching Chrono Symphonic on Google. It is amazing. Overall, Chrono Trigger is a fantastic game that I would call next to perfection. From the large and well-written storyline, the innovative combat system, the mind-blowing graphics, and lastly, the orgasmic musical score, Chrono Trigger is a game that, to this day, I will give a 10 out of 10. If for nothing else, it is one game that truly stands the test of time. I have beaten it over 30 times, and intend to one day sit down and beat it yet again. If you have not experienced this masterpiece for yourself, then you really need to. Even if you have to use an emulator to play it because the cartridge itself is freaking expensive. Truly, if you are a fan of RPGs at all and have not played Chrono Trigger, there is definitely something wrong with you. Though to close things out, I would like to raise the one complaint I have, and that would be with the cover art itself. No, don't get me wrong, it is very beautiful and well drawn. The issue is that for some reason they have Morrow using a fire spell when in the game she can only use ice magic, and they are fighting this monster in the snow when you actually fight him in a cave. It is kind of sad to see such obvious continuity errors on the case of a game and the cover art of the box of an otherwise perfect game.
Hello everyone and welcome to my review of the first Batman film directed by Joel Schumacher, which is Batman Forever. Let's talk about the film, shall we? So the story shows Batman, played by Val Kilmer, suiting up as Two-Face, played by Tommy Lee Jones, has a security guard tied up as a hostage trying to bait Batman. Once Batman shows up, we see Dr. Chase Meridian, played by Nicole Kidman, who, needless to say, has a crush on Batman. Eventually, Batman saves the security guard from a safe full of boiling acid. However, in the process, Two-Face manages to escape. The very next day, we head to Wayne Enterprises, where we are introduced to Edward Nygma, played by Jim Carrey, whose project is rejected by Bruce Wayne as it deals with brain manipulation, and of course he doesn't take it well as he's been sending Bruce Wayne a bunch of riddles. We also see a brief flashback of Two-Face, who is the district attorney of Gotham City named Harvey Dent, who while convicting a mob boss, Batman tried to save him, but the mob boss threw acid on his face which left him horribly scarred and apparently made him insane. While Bruce Wayne's taking Chase Meridian to the circus where we see the Flying Graysons, including Richard or Dick Grayson, played by Chris O'Donnell, and while the show's going on, Two-Face pops up and takes everyone hostage and plans on blowing up the building unless if someone tells him who Batman is. While Dick Grayson manages to throw the bomb in the nearest lake, his family winds up falling to their deaths at the hands of Two-Face, where Commissioner Gordon puts him in Bruce Wayne's care, but of course he wants revenge on Two-Face. Eventually, Edward Nygma chooses to become the Riddler and teams up with Two-Face. Two-Face wants to just kill Batman, but the Riddler takes a very different approach and plans on putting his device he calls the Box in every home in Gotham in order to steal their secrets. As the film progresses, we see Dick Grayson become Robin and team up with Batman against this formidable duo. Now we're to question, will Dick Grayson kill Two-Face? And how can Batman and Robin stop the Riddler and Two-Face? That's all the plot I'll mention, so now it's time for me to say what I liked about Batman Forever, what I did not like about Batman Forever, some trivia on my overall opinion on the film. Okay, so what did I like about Batman Forever? The acting to me is a mixed bag, with one performance in particular I'll bring up later in the cons. Val Kilmer I could buy as Bruce Wayne because I felt he pulled off the businessman in his 30s decently enough. However, as Batman, it feels like he's trying a bit too hard to be like Michael Keaton's Batman, and I feel he didn't succeed. Chris O'Donnell was pretty good as Robin, that he did make his vengeance against Two-Face somewhat believable, and I felt he worked pretty well with Val Kilmer, especially whenever he talks to Bruce how he wants to help him get revenge on Two-Face. Jim Carrey as the Riddler, for how the character was written, he was perfect for the part, but unfortunately whenever I see him goofing around on screen, I can't tell the actor from the character. I just see Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey, though having said that, he definitely stole the show here. Nicole Kidman as Dr. Chase Meridian, I don't have a lot to say other than she read her lines well enough, but her character is really shallow and she didn't have much material to work with. Now if anyone wants to know my thoughts on Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face, I'll mention that later. There are other people to mention, like Drew Barrymore as one of Two-Face's girlfriends, Sugar, Pat Hingle as Commissioner Gordon, Ed Beagley Jr. as Edward Nygma's boss, Fred Stickley, Michael Goff as Alfred Pennyworth, and even Debbie Mazar as the other girlfriend to Two-Face Spice, but really aside from saying they are overall decent, I don't have a lot left I can add about the acting. The music by Elliot Goldenthal is overall pretty good, though I don't think it's as memorable as Danny Elfman's score, and I don't really have a lot to say about it. I felt he used string, brass, and orchestra music pretty well. One bit I still like is the opening theme, as I felt it was appropriately bombastic for the opening credits, and when Batman suits up to save the day. The production values such as costume design, set design, special effects, etc., just like the acting, I feel is a mixed bag. Some of the miniatures look great for 1995, and some of the CG, though nowadays look pretty outdated by today's standards, look pretty impressive for the time. And I will say the part where Batman is falling from a rooftop to try and catch Two-Face still looks impressive to me even to this day. I will say the cinematography is also very good in that some of the shots are very low lit. Sure, it sometimes goes overboard with neon and the Batmobile's not subtle in the slightest, but I felt the way it was shot and lit, it felt like its own thing and not an imitation of any of the previous live-action Batman films. Lastly, I will say some of the costume design, while there will definitely be a few things I'll bring up later in the cons, looked okay. One example I will say is the redesign of the Batsuit, ignoring the extra features if you catch my drift. I don't have a lot to say other than it looks close enough to the burn suit. The action scenes I don't really have a lot to say other than they are decently shot and choreographed, though they got a lot more slapsticky with the use of cartoon sound effects, though to be fair here it is a bit tame when compared to the next Batman film directed by Joel Schumacher. I will say this though, I felt it was a bit more innovative than the ones in the Byrne films with how they're shot, though as far as the final confrontation with Two-Face and the Riddler goes, I'll bring my thoughts of that later. The directed by Joel Schumacher is overall okay. There's nothing here I saw as incompetent, but I wouldn't say it was anything spectacular either. The way the actors were directed I felt was decent with the exception of Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face, plus I felt he made it look like a comic book brought to the big screen, but in a different way than the Tim Burton films. With the Tim Burton films, I felt he got the feeling through its surreal atmosphere, whereas here it's obviously brighter and more colorful, but I felt he used camera angles, most notably Dutch angles, pretty effectively, and he thankfully didn't overuse them. And it was pretty decently paced, though there is one delete scene I wish they kept in, which I'll bring up with my next and last pro to Batman Forever. Lastly, the overall story is decent, though mostly forgettable, and there are a few things about it that bug me, which I'll bring up later in the cons. And sure, it is incredibly cheesy. We're saying it's brighter, more colorful, and that Batman Returns would be quite the understatement. But I felt it had some really good ideas. Most notably when we flash back to Bruce's childhood, where he blames himself for the death of his parents, and in a deleted scene they showed that his parents originally didn't want to go to the theater, but Bruce insisted that they go, so he thinks had he not asked them to go to the theater, then they would have still been alive. And that parallels to how Dick Grayson feels about the death of his parents, and I felt had that scene been in the final product, it would have been a proper payoff to that idea, and would have been a very fitting piece to Bruce's character arc, in that it would give it a lot more weight than what we got in the end. I also felt the interaction between Dick and Bruce after Dick wants Batman to help him get his revenge on Two-Face by killing him to be actually pretty interesting. Now for some of the things I did not like about Batman Forever. I will say I did not like Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face, largely because it felt like a Joker knockoff. Now before I explain why I didn't like this portrayal, I want to say this. I think not only is Tommy Lee Jones a great actor, but for the time he could have made a great Two-Face, and to be fair to him, I don't really blame him for the performance, as I felt the character was badly written. Plus the direction didn't help matters, and sure, you could argue he's insane, but from what I know of Two-Face, he is supposed to have a duality problem, much like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and the coin is the deciding factor in his decisions, but it's never conveyed very effectively, because I never once got the impression that he had more than one personality, and throughout the film, really all he does is flip a coin and laugh a lot. One scene in particular that felt really out of character for Two-Face is the scene where him and the Riddler are in Wayne Manor, and while the Riddler and Two-Face's goons are causing destruction to not just the Batcave, but also Wayne Manor, he kept on flipping the coin until he got the side he wanted it and shoots Bruce Wayne, when it's like he would have flipped the coin and whatever it came up as made his decision there, and it doesn't help that he's done this just about every other time he's flipped a coin and made his decision on whatever it hit. So to me, that stuck out like a sore thumb. Lastly, I will say it also doesn't help matters that his backstory and motivation I feel was rather flimsy and not laid out or even well thought out at all. As I mentioned earlier, some of the costume design did look okay, but then we have a few that I don't care for, like the Riddler's outfit. The first costume the Riddler wore looked fine enough, but when he has tights on, it looks terrible, and I will admit I'm not a huge fan of the design of Batman's newest suit and Robin's suit, and no, not because of the extra features on them, but because the problem to me is I never once got the impression that they're armored, especially the Batman suit. Also, while the Batwing and the Batboat were nice to see, besides sending the characters from point A to point B and getting blown up, they never really served a purpose in the story. While I said the action scenes were overall decent, I felt the climax with Two-Face and the Riddler was a real letdown, as I felt they were defeated way too easily. I found it disappointing that the Riddler and or Two-Face didn't really have a confrontation with Batman, whether it was a fistfight or a battle of the minds. Also, I wish Two-Face actually lived and was sent to Arkham Asylum, because it would have completed Dick Grayson's character arc better than have him fall to his death, especially when earlier in the film Dick actually saved Two-Face from falling to his death, preferring to see him in jail. Lastly, while I said the overall story has some good ideas and is pretty decent, there are some aspects that either don't add up or just does not make sense, such as when the Riddler uses a giant laser-looking thing to blow up the Batwing. What on earth is he even using? Brainwaves? If so, since when can brainwaves be used as a giant laser? If putting the box stick thing on makes the Riddler smarter, then why doesn't it make Two-Face smarter, especially when we see he puts the thing on more than once? I also felt they solved the Riddler's riddles a bit too easily, and when they pieced everything together that Edward Nygma's the Riddler, it took Bruce and Alfred all of like 30 seconds to figure it out. If Bruce thought Meridian was in trouble, why not tell the police, considering they were in the police department, rather than break down the door and make him suspicious? If the Batcave said intruder alert, you'd think the first idea would be to hide everything so that in case it was an enemy who wants Batman's blood on its hands, not show off the computer, even the Batmobile. And if it was people barging into Wayne Manor, then I would have let that slide. But given it happened when Dick Grayson discovered the Batcave, back when Bruce Wayne was still Batman, I have to ask, why on earth would you even do that? It's just these kinds of issues, nitpicks, and serious story problems that really do add up after a while and start to overshadow the good qualities of the film. Now for some trivia. Batman Forever was nominated for 3 Oscars, as it was up for Best Cinematography, Best Sound Editing, and Best Sound Mixing, plus the U2 song Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me was up for not just the Golden Globe for Best Original Song, but it was also up for the Razzie for Worst Original Song. Well, I said Marlon Wayans was originally cast as Robin for Batman Returns before they chose to hold off the character for another film. There were other people that were considered for the part before ultimately Chris O'Donnell was casted. From what I gathered, a few names include Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Toby Stevens, Ewan McGregor, and even Mark Wahlberg. Before Nicole Kidman was cast as Dr. Chase Meridian, there were several actresses that were rumored to be in the running, including Sandra Bullock, Cindy Crawford, and at one point they cast Rene Russo back when Michael Keaton was still attached to the project, but when he dropped out because he didn't like the direction Joel Schumacher was taking the franchise, they deemed her too old to play the part, and so it was given to Nicole Kidman. Prior to Nicole Kidman being cast as Dr. Chase Meridian, Joel Schumacher actually wanted Nicole Kidman to play the role of Poison Ivy, but he decided that Two-Face, the Riddler, and Poison Ivy would be too many villains, and so Poison Ivy was saved for the sequel. It's been reported that the personality clashes between Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey annoyed Joel Schumacher so much that he had said he never wanted to work with those two ever again, until 12 years later when Joel Schumacher directed the film The Number 23, which starred Jim Carrey. And apparently there are clashes between Joel Schumacher and Val Kilmer while they were filming, and from what I gathered, things got so bad that Val Kilmer wouldn't talk to Joel Schumacher for like 2 weeks. According to the trivia page on IMDb, before Val Kilmer was cast as Batman, other names that are considered for the role from what I can find included Daniel Day-Lewis, Kurt Russell, Alec Baldwin, Ethan Hawke, Ray Fiennes, Tom Hanks, and even Johnny Depp. The director of the film is Joel Schumacher, who also directed The Lost Boys, The Client, Falling Down, Phone Booth, and even the 2004 adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera. Some of the other roles that cast were includes Val Kilmer, who you might know as Lieutenant Tom Iceman Kazansky from Top Gun, Moses and God from the second film ever made by DreamWorks Animation, as well as the first traditionally animated film, The Prince of Egypt, Bravo from Planes, the voice of Kit from the 2008 revival of Knight Rider, and yes, he was even Dr. Montgomery from the 1996 film adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau. Tommy Lee Jones, who also played Clay Shaw from JFK, where he was nominated for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, Marshall Samuel Jarrell from The Fugitive, where he not only won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, but also the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor as well, Sheriff Ed Bell from the 2007 film adaptation of No Country for Old Men, Thaddeus Stevens from Lincoln, where he was nominated for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, Colonel Chester Phillips from Captain America The First Avenger, and he was even Agent K from the Men in Black trilogy. Jim Carrey also played Ace Ventura from not only Ace Ventura Pet Detective, but also its 1995 sequel Ace Ventura When Nature Calls, Truman Burbank from The Truman Show, Lloyd Christmas from Dumb and Dumber and its upcoming sequel Dumb and Dumber 2, The Grinch from Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, The Mask from, well, The Mask, Horton from the 2008 film adaptation of Horton Hears a Who, and yes, he was even Colonel Stars and Stripes from Kick-Ass 2. Lastly, we have Nicole Kidman, who also played Santine from Moulin Rouge, where she not only won the Golden Globe for Best Actress, Musical, or Comedy, but she was also up for the Academy Award for Best Actress. Grace Stewart from The Others, where she was nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Actress Drama, Becca Corbett from Rabbit Hole, where she was not only nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Actress Drama, but also the Academy Award for Best Actress as well, and she was even Virginia Woolf from The Hours, where she won both the Golden Globe for Best Actress Drama and the Academy Award for Best Actress. Overall, Batman Forever is a pretty entertaining though forgettable film. The problem is, for every good thing I could say about it, there's a problem that really does hurt the film. Some of the acting is decent, but then we also have some terrible performances. The story has some really good ideas, and had it had proper payoff, could have gave it some real weight, but then there are moments that just don't make any sense, and I can't help but feel they're just dumbing it down to appeal to a wider audience. The directing's overall alright, the cinematography is great, and most of the technicals looked good for the time, but for the most part looks pretty outdated. Now, I will be honest, when I was a kid, I remember liking the Schumacher films more than the Tim Burton Batman films, because I liked that it was lighthearted, and that leads to my next point. Would I recommend this film to people? If you have younger kids and you thought the Tim Burton films were too dark and want to introduce them to the character of Batman in a different way, then I will say this film, while forgettable, is overall harmless, as it does not have too graphic of violence or explicit sex, and I feel the best word to describe it is harmless, because I did not really see anything that was insulting even to children's intelligence. Still, as a film on its own merits, I feel Batman Forever is just average. It does have good elements to it, and that I will not deny, but it also has many things that really do hurt the film, and like I said, it's mostly forgettable. I give Batman Forever 2 stars out of 4, and a 5 out of 10. So that's my review of Batman Forever. If you want to express your opinion on the film, you are more than welcome to, but I ask you to please be civil about it. Any bashing and or personal attacks on anyone will be removed the minute I see them, and it will result in a block, which is the last thing I want to do. So that's my review of Batman Forever. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Time for my first game review. I say, what better way to start than talk about one of my favorite games for the Super Nintendo, Super Punch-Out. Honestly, I don't see many people talking about this game. I think that this is one of the best games on the system, and I actually, believe it or not, like it a little bit more than the famous NES game, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Now hold up everybody, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, and I think it's one of my favorite games on the NES. However, I just like Super Punch-Out a little bit more, but that's just my opinion. This game's story is just as simplistic as its NES predecessor. You are a boxer, except in this game, it's actually kind of unknown who the boxer actually is. Some people say it's Little Mac himself, the boxer from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, but others say he's someone else. For the sake of just not confusing ourselves, let's just call him Bob. Anyways, Bob is fighting through fighters of different countries to become the world boxing champion. Simple as that. However, you, as Bob, must be able to scan your opponent's moves and evade accordingly and then strike. Otherwise, you won't be able to beat this game. The controls are very solid for the most part. To dodge, you press left or right on the D-pad, depending on where you want to dodge, and to duck, you press down on the D-pad. Pressing up alone makes you block high, while doing nothing makes you block low. Pressing Y makes you do a left body blow, while pressing B makes you do a right body blow. Pressing up and Y, however, at the same time, makes you do a left jab to the face, while pressing up and B makes you do a right jab to the face. The A button, once the meter's full, allows you to do a super hook, but holding up and A allows you to do a super uppercut. Keep in mind that the super punches are slightly delayed, so be careful and time accordingly. Pressing A twice makes you do a rapid punch, though personally, I recommend the super hooks and uppercuts instead. The graphics for this game are really good, and it really looks like a solid arcade game. There are actually some things they changed from the original NES game. First off, in the NES game, you needed to press down twice in order to duck, but in this game, you only need to press it once. Much better. Second, you can actually hold your dodges for a little longer. This comes in really handy when the opponent does a delayed punch or you mistime your dodge. Mistime? Is that even a word? Whatever. Another thing they added is, in this game, you can block high or block low, unlike the NES game where you only just block. And blocking doesn't damage you slightly anymore. Some moves in this game can only be dodged a specific way, unlike the NES game where you just dodge and you'll be able to evade the move. This is the reason why I prefer this game more, because it adds a little bit more challenge to the thing. That said, this game is still significantly easier than the NES game, which is the reason why I think a lot of people like the NES game more. The music for this game is decent, but not as catchy as the original NES theme. Also, I just want to say this right now, the final boss for this game is one of the most blandest video game characters I have ever seen. Okay, remember the NES game, the final boss was, well, Mike Tyson, which was an exciting final boss. Here, the final boss is this guy named Nick Bruiser who looks like Mr. Clean, and he's bland. There's nothing about him. He has literally no personality trait whatsoever. Like, this is one of the most disappointing final bosses I've seen in this game, despite him being hard as hell. Oh well, once you beat this game, you obviously get the credits, and I would say that Super Punch-Out is a very solid game with solid controls and very fun gameplay. I would recommend checking out this game out, or at least, you know, playing it on an emulator, because it's a really good game.
Did you ever have that feeling that whenever you watch an episode for the first time around, something comes up within the episode that you don't like and that you immediately hated it? And you still hate it when it comes towards rewatching the episode over and over again? That was with me in my first couple viewings of the finale from The Amazing World of Gumball, especially when it first came out. After viewing it the first time, I was extremely disappointed with the ending of the episode, as it didn't met with my overall expectations of the show itself. And when I mean by expectations, I mean that it should fit the overall standards of having good and serious story writing that should teach people morals within their lives. Yeah, keep in mind, when the episode first came out, I was in this problematic viewpoint who thinks that cartoons were serious business and should be treated as such. However, did you also get that feeling that after taking a few moments to yourself and think about that said episode, you try to see as to why they did what they did, and maybe, just maybe, you think to yourself saying, you know what? I misjudged the episode. It wasn't really that bad now that I think about it. That was with me in the finale. Funny story about that. The synopsis of the episode is that the star of the episode/show, Gumball Watterson, and the rest of his family are fixing the wrongdoings that they have caused in the past after they were told that they must pay the damages after what happened with Mrs. Jotunheimer's son destroying 75% of Elmore, as mentioned in the previous episode. Gumball's father Richard paying up the damages for reckless driving or else he'll be jailed, again. Gumball and his brother/petfish Darwin must start all the way back to kindergarten for aggravating people. Honestly, kinda a dumb reason, but okay. And paying $800,000 to the bank or else they will lose their house. However, along the way, they eventually messed things up even more to the point where they were sent to jail because they've broken a few laws during the process. They then escaped jail and then tried to solve the problems that they had by creating more problems to the point where the townspeople wanted to fisticuffs them. Now, I won't be reviewing a whole lot of the beginning or the middle part of it, as I mainly want to talk about the ending. However, if I may, I do want to talk about the part where they do start the episode, where they're looking back at old memories, or in this case, flashbacks of previous episodes, thinking that any kind of consequences are not in their worries, until when the news hits the doorstep.
Do you remember the time when your kids wound up my boy and he went on a rampage? Here's your half of the bill for the reconstruction work. Why are you looking so surprised? Did you really think we lived in some kind of fairy tale? 'Cause wake up, buddy, we don't.
Back when I first watched this episode, and heck, I still do now, I really like this part. I think I really like this part because back then, I thought that, well, she's right. Whatever you do may or may not have consequences later on within the future, whether it be a good thing or a bad thing. And I was hoping for the fact that they could do something clever with it that has a resolution. The present me, on the other hand, sees it in a different light, as no matter the end result of the conflict is, I haven't really seen a lot of Western animated shows or episodes that tries to take that approach with the whole past offense will lead towards consequences. And while there's the plot of having the townspeople hating on the main characters in an episode, most of the time I haven't necessarily seen it done well. So even for now, I'm really glad that this conflict from the finale was sorta new and refreshing to me. As for everything else within the beginning and the middle part, I honestly think that's fine. There's really nothing hugely noteworthy for me to even talk about. There are some good laughs here and there, and how they've reached towards the climax of them being thrown into jail and then getting out of jail flowed naturally without any real hiccups. What I actually wanted to talk about was actually about the ending, so spoilers, I guess? I don't know. Anyways, after when the Watersons created more chaos in Elmore, the townspeople decided to head over towards the house and fight them. Then this happens while the Watersons are huddling in the corner.
This is it! It's all over! The end of the Watersons! The only thing that can save us is reality being completely reset by some kind of magic device!
And then the episode ends abruptly. Thanks for watching, everyone. Now go home. Anyways, when I first saw this episode, I was, well, not happy with it. Like at all. I was not happy back then because it seemed like as if it was a cop-out. And I thought that it was a cop-out back then simply because it didn't resolve any of the story elements in a thorough manner and then ends the episode abruptly. Even after all of the commotions that the Watersons made, back then I thought that they could have either rewritten just the ending so that they could have made a satisfying ending, such as how they could have a joke about the Watersons doing community service or moving into a different town, or just some of the weird reason resolve the conflict by winning a jackpot from the lottery that they could pay the damages, but then also create another conflict by seeing how many can corrupt them once they have the extra money to spend. Actually, now that I think about it, the latter makes a lot more sense in storytelling wise. I also didn't really like it because I thought when I looked up the episode back then, the ending to some people was considered as a deus ex machina, or God from the Machine. According to Wikipedia, and I quote, the term has evolved to mean a plot device whereby a seemingly unresolvable problem is suddenly and abruptly resolved by the inspired and unexpected intervention of some new event, character, ability, or object. Its function can be to resolve an otherwise unresolvable plot situation, to surprise the audience, to bring the tale to a happy ending, or to act as a comedic device. Post-production, do note that this quote was actually used from June the 17th of 2017, and the more recent edit, December the 4th, 2019, said that after the quote about the abruptly resolved by an unexpected and seemingly unlikely occurrence, it is typically so much as to seem contrived. Upon hearing this back then, even without the context of what some stories can correctly use it for, I found that to be a lazy way out, as I don't agree that a writer should write about an unresolvable plot situation just for a situation to be solved. I think the best way to describe it was that I personally thought that it could have been resolved if they didn't create an unresolvable plot to begin with, or just have the bad guys win or the tragedy to happen, but then make a glimmer of hope, such as having justice against the bad guys, or show that there can be some kind of resolution or hope after a tragedy in one way, shape, or form. So yeah, that gave me a really bad taste in my mouth upon hearing about this. But looking back at it now, my mind has changed about the ending of the episode for a variety of reasons. The first part was with what Gumball said. The only thing that can save us is reality being completely reset by some kind of magic device. This actually happens a lot more than you know in cartoons and has a reset button so that previous conflicts are forgotten. Take a look at The Simpsons, as that happens a lot after an episode. Heck, it happens a lot in The Amazing World of Gumball, even with some of the continuity that they have in some of the later episodes. Right after the episode ends, the reset button was used and everything is back to normal with no consequences towards the Watersons at all. And it made sense for the show to do that. And this gives a fresh new start towards the third season, my favorite season of the series as a whole. So that's actually pretty satisfying too. But I think the main thing that not only do I now really like the episode, but something in which case that I completely missed back then was, well, it was a joke. A simple joke that actually played off decently well. The joke was that after when Gumball said that final statement at the end, the credits would roll in. Looking back at it now, that's actually pretty funny. I think the main gripe of it back then was when watching the episode the first time, after when Gumball said that final statement, they would cut to the promo of the next episode of Uncle Grandma, so I kinda blame Cartoon Network for this instead. Looking back at it now, not only was I taking the ending way too seriously, but it was one of the things that gave me a new perspective towards how I felt about cartoons as a whole. that it shouldn't be taken too seriously. I really do commend Gumball for taking that step in the episode, and I really love the episode now. Plain and simple.
I'm just going to give you all a little bit of an update before I start. I'm currently in the process of making scripts for 2 co-op reviews in my Sean's Network Reviews series, and I decided to hold on for a second before I do my top 10 favorite Unikitty episodes list, since I want to take my time and I do want to get people to look at that script before I start production on the actual video, since I want to see if I could explain things a little more, or add some more things to some of my entries on that list. I decided to release my worst list without having people look at the script as a test to see if people would be interested in checking the script for the best list or not. As of right now, I'm not finished with the script for the best list yet, but once I do get the motivation to finish it, I'll send the script to some people so they could check it. As for Sean's Network Reviews, I have quite a bit of episodes in the works. I decided to delay the reviews that I said that I would do on Thundercats Roar and Ollie's Pack, since I haven't watched enough episodes of those shows to get enough of a good grasp on why I think that they don't work. But other shows I do have plans to review. 2 of them, which are co-op reviews with Supersonic Ward 15 and The Gem of 99, are both on Making Fiends and Robot Boy. Making Fiends with Sonic Ward, and Robot Boy with Gem. Both of these reviews are going to take a little bit of time in the scripting phase, since co-ops on anything usually relies on chemistry to make them work. And giving quick thoughts right now, one of these shows I feel mixed on, while the other has so many problems that I'm speculating that my co-op with Gem will come out after the co-op with Ward on Making Fiends. I also have plans on reviewing Puka, a show that holds up very well after remembering watching the show a lot when I was little, that I decided to rewatch a dozen episodes of. And also Kuku Harajuku, a show that I avoided like the plague after I watched one half-hour episode in 2016, due to how unwatchable I think the animation is. And going back and watching a dozen episodes with sunglasses on more recently, the show was much worse than I originally thought it was. And not only that, but on Memorial Day weekend of this year, me and my family members are going to be extremely busy, and that statement depends on when this video in particular comes out. So I decided to pick something easy to make a video about, and luckily in the palm of my hands, I found something very easy to talk about in a solo video. And I say this because the show that I'm talking about today, Kamp Koral, while I don't like the show, it's very easy to talk about because there's not much to really talk about with this show. I am technically late with the first impressions video, considering the fact that the show's first few episodes premiered in March of this year, while at the moment it's the middle of May at the time that I'm writing this script. But there are only 6 episodes of Kamp Koral so far, and just getting this right out of the way before starting this review, while I don't think that this show is good, I actually think that this show is bad in fact, the show is not the worst thing ever, nor is it even close to being the worst thing that I have or will ever review. Describing it best, this show is harmless, but that is for now since, as I said, it only has 6 episodes at the moment, and depending on what I think about the next few episodes when they come out, the show could either get better or it could end up getting worse. Thundercats Roar, for example, when the show's first 2 episodes were released online, I originally believed that it was in the category of just bad, since I did think that the first 2 episodes had problems with running gags in its animation. Then the next couple of episodes came out weeks later, and to me ranked the show from being just bad to awful. Or the opposite could be the case. I originally believed that both The Angry Beavers and My Life as a Teenage Robot were just good, but as I continued watching, I started believing that those shows were better and more interesting than I originally thought they were. But that really does depend. While I don't believe that Kamp Koral is nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, it's pretty underwhelming if I'm being honest with you guys. And no, it has nothing to do with the fact that Nickelodeon defiled Steven Hillenburg's wishes, even though that ended up being revealed to not be the case. Rather, It had something to do with the premise, the animation style that the show was going to use, and the choice in the cast of characters in the show. You see, when the show was first announced in June of 2019, it was revealed what characters were going to be in this show, that it was going to be set in a summer camp, and the fact that the show would include aged-down versions of the characters that we've seen in the original series. And this was all that I could think about when I heard about the first announcement for this show when it popped up. I was wondering, didn't we already just get 2 shows that were set in a summer camp and had aged-down versions of characters not too long before this show was announced? And how was this show going to work in 3D animation? All throughout the rest of 2019 and into most of 2020, the rest of the announcements for Kamp Koral were rather silent. Basically, kind of like a Thundercats Roar type of situation, where we would occasionally get a photo or preview of what the show is going to look like, but the show otherwise would remain a mystery. Up until we got a small preview of what Kamp Koral was going to look like at the end of 2020 in a promo for Nickelodeon's Wildcard game, where we see a few seconds of what Kamp Koral will look like, and my first thought was, I knew that the show being in 3D was going to be a major issue, and that particular I knew it realization made its way to the preview that we did get of the first episode, as well as when I got around to watching the actual show. And while the show's actual quality doesn't match the sync with the problems with the animation or even the continuity issues, since I surprisingly didn't have too many notable bad things to bring up with the show, 2 things did keep it down to the level that it is now. Kamp Koral revolves around younger versions of the characters from SpongeBob SquarePants and their wacky adventures at Kamp Koral, that is heavily implied to be a prequel to SpongeBob SquarePants, despite continuity issues that I'll be getting into in a little bit. These characters include SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Sandy as the campers, Mr. Krabs as the camp director, Pearl as the newborn baby, Mrs. Puff as the scoutmaster and activity teacher, and Plankton and Karen as the camp chefs. Going into this show for the first time, I was actually expecting this show to have a lot of problems, since as a SpongeBob spin-off slash prequel, there were quite a lot of things that the show was going to do that weren't going to work, like the animation and problems with how the show tries to tell SpongeBob's origins. But after watching episode after episode after episode, I found that there were not too many notable things to comment on with this show. Oh, I think that this show definitely has problems without a doubt, but those issues that I have with this show are just salt on the open wound of what honestly would have been just a meh 5 out of 10 kind of show. In a way, the meh parts of this show kind of reminds me of what I thought of something like Smurfs The Lost Village, which I also didn't have a lot to comment on, except for the animation. Kamp Koral is kind of the same, but get rid of the animation part as a positive. Each episode that I've watched of this show falls into one of 3 categories. There are the episodes that are kind of annoying, the ones that raise a lot of questions, and the ones that I didn't have a lot to say about. They're just that. White noise. The animation in certain aspects did legitimately impress me, particularly the effects that they would use whenever SpongeBob or whoever else is on screen gets stung by jellyfish, but the rest of the series just feels empty of substance. Even in terms of entertainment value, it's perfectly in the middle with not a lot to say. It's not boring like I think that the Tom and Jerry comedy show or Alvin and the Chipmunks 2015 are, not as annoying as Thundercats Roar is, not as unpleasant as Ollie's Pack, not as infuriating as Robot Boy, and not as unwatchable as Kuku Harajuku. And it's not even really something that is enjoyable to watch because none of the things in the show sparks the enjoyable or interesting factor, which is what I thought about Nightmare Ned and Teacher's Pet. While I was able to watch all the episodes that are available of this show in one day and in one sitting, I got the impression of the episodes, aside from me saying eh, was just me kind of feeling bored. No, not the kind of bored where I end up having to watch something interesting afterwards to make me feel like I'm anticipating to do that thing again, unlike how I felt towards the Tom and Jerry comedy show and even how I felt about Alvin and the Chipmunks 2015. Instead, it's the kind where I was wishing that I was watching a completely different show instead, and to get watching the rest of the episodes out of the way quickly. This particular aspect alone would have probably given this show a 5 out of 10, since its sit-through kind of show where I was able to sit through the whole episode would give it a 5 out of 10. However, there's the other aspects of this show that are actually things that really hurt the quality of the entire show, and those things are the continuity and the animation. Starting off with the animation to get this right out of the way, when Kamp Koral was first announced, alongside some of the characters that they were going to bring onto the show, the announcement that the show was going to be done in 3D animation was actually one of my biggest concerns with this series. Unless you are Pixar or DreamWorks, 3D animation on television always had their disadvantages, since television animation is usually given a lower budget than that of theatrical animation. That's why William Hanna and Joseph Barbera went from the original MGM Tom and Jerry shorts in the 1940s and 1950s, when cartoons were theatrical, to the limited animation of the 1960s when television became popular and was being used. And the limited budget of anything animated also applies to 3D animation. Earlier CGI cartoons like Reboot and Beast Wars end up looking extremely dated when compared to how cartoons are now, and others would fall into the uncanny valley or have a frame rate issue. To be fair, the animation in some of these cartoons would be their weakest element, and they would be saved by the writing. Even with some of what I think are some of the better 3D animated cartoons like The Penguins of Madagascar or Miraculous Ladybug, the animation is their weakest element. The only times when 3D animation could get really good is if they have a huge company like DreamWorks working for them, or in things like Fanboy and Chum Chum, as bad as I think that show is, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012. 2D and 3D animation have their own different ways of executing something. 3D is able to show every angle of a particular character, can add humorous things just like 2D animation, and can be technically impressive, but is much more limited with expressions, unless you want to leave it unpolished and horrifying. And 2D is able to exaggerate and make wacky faces without falling into the uncanny valley, and is able to do exaggerated movements and moments without everything feeling sudden or the viewers questioning if there were frames missing. And that's the exact problem that I have with the animation in this series. At every turn, all that could be asked is, why this show wasn't done in 2D animation. Maybe it was to make this show stand out from the original series. However, something that sounds like a good idea in your head could end up becoming poorly executed when you put it into a series. Because both 2D and 3D animation are meant to be used and consumed differently, at least in television. There are some things that I think that this show does well. For example, on paper, the character designs look good, and they luckily translated very well into computer animation. And as I said, I really was impressed by the show's effects, and some elements of things like the backgrounds are rendered fine. The problems start forming whenever exaggerated expressions and overly detailed marks make their way on screen. Hand-drawn animation is the best medium for exaggeration. They're usually the source of getting memes made out of. SpongeBob is one of the biggest examples of this. Heck, SpongeBob isn't even the only show that has memorable faces that were made. Ren and Stimpy helped popularize this, and OKKO did this quite a lot. In a 3D medium, this could very easily fall into the uncanny valley depending on if the character is well rendered or not. And this show has tons of moments where it does things like this and actually has a plethora of faces that could unintentionally come off as nasty looking or disturbing. The reason why the mouth extending larger than the face works in hand-drawn animation is because it's not as detailed as 3D animation, and you'd expect that the character would do that in that medium. And SpongeBob crying in the first episode looks very uncanny because of the looks on his eyes. And then there's the part in that same episode with SpongeBob being all stung, it looks absolutely horrifying. And that's because they're doing what the other SpongeBob series has done for years, and any hand-drawn animated show has done for years, by covering a character in pimples when that certain character gets stung or gets swelled up because of a major accident. They would do this to show that the character had an allergy side effect or got into an accident, or for comedic purposes. But the thing that this show doesn't really understand is that what looks comedic in 2D could become disturbing in 3D. And this show does the thing that the original SpongeBob series does by having the expressions go comedic way too much. And these particular expressions changes in a jump cut kind of way, and there's usually no smooth transition to some of these expressions. Whereas in things like 2D animation and other 3D shows of its kind, they animated faces going from one face to the other. I think I know why Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2012 often used 2D elements when it used the anime-esque faces, because those faces would be very difficult to animate when you're doing a 3D animated series. And the animation can also get very inconsistent. And I'm not talking about the expressions, which those are done for comedic purposes. No, when I say inconsistent, I'm talking about the animation quality of the show. There are several moments of this show where it goes from looking fully complete and standardly rendered for a CGI cartoon from Nickelodeon, to looking unpolished and not fully rendered, or looking incredibly fake. The biggest example of this is in the intro for the show, particularly with this frame. And the worst part of this is that this is the intro for the show. Flaws like this are going to be the viewer's first impressions of the show, that it looks like it came out of an early 3D video game cutscene. In fact, this screenshot right here looks like something out of Light's Camera Pants, which was released in 2005. And because a lot of the textures in this show look very unpolished, they end up looking very plastic, leading to the animation in this show becoming extremely unfinished, which also results in some of the expressions that this show does becoming even worse. When the preview for the first episode came out in January, one of the animators behind Kamp Koral said that Nickelodeon decided to release unfinished footage from the first episode, but after watching the first episode, as well as the other ones, I really don't believe that it's the case whatsoever. The show still looks unpolished and unfinished in certain parts, alongside the uncanny looking expressions. But the animation isn't the only problem with this show, and I don't even think that's the worst part of this show. No, that actually belongs to the continuity and how much this show retcons from the original series. Now, I understand that the original SpongeBob series is not really a show that has ever cared about continuity. The only thing that the original series cared about is making you laugh. And you know, that's completely fine. You could watch the original series in any order you want because it was episodic. Some of the continuity issues that the original series had was that the locations in which the characters would get to would always be changing or didn't have the other known building in the same shot. However, that's really the most that the original series did. The show still did have its characters stay consistent, and it didn't change the characters' origins constantly, and the show set up how the characters met. Something that this show did not take into consideration. I can understand why Patrick is in this show, since we didn't know how SpongeBob met him in the original series. Aside from one joke in the episode Secret Box, we don't know how SpongeBob and Patrick met, so I can understand Patrick being in this show. The other characters, however, I have several problems with. Now, I did say that not having continuity as well as not being good with it is fine, but there is a limit to that particular get out of jail free card. The original series was not that distracting with this problem since it had a plethora of jokes to keep you occupied with that instead of being distracted by the contradictions in that show. This one, though, does this with flying colors, to a point where it's distracting. And there's not even that many jokes to keep you distracted from the noticeable problems. Which, by the way, the jokes in this show are not even that memorable or even noticeable, and some in particular go on for way too long. And the show also doesn't know about what makes something humorous. In the preview of the first episode that we saw, the joke was that Patrick was stalling for a long time to keep SpongeBob and the others from jellyfishing, and the literal punchline to this joke is Patrick being a hypocrite, which followed up with another joke that went on for way too long where SpongeBob was trying to catch a jellyfish while talking to his mom, and the punchline to that joke is SpongeBob's mom asking him if he caught his first jellyfish yet. And the show also believes that characters making wacky faces and being hyperactive equals funny. While sure, these particular things would make younger kids laugh, for those who are older, the jokes in this show easily fall flat on their faces. You know how the recent seasons of SpongeBob, seasons 9B to 13, usually get criticized for how their humor consists of wacky faces and all of that? Which I disagree about because there are actually other jokes in those episodes besides doing wacky faces. Well, that particular criticism that people launch at the recent seasons of SpongeBob is actually the case in Camp Koral. Whenever a joke isn't killed by the fact that they drag on for way too long, they're just making distorted faces just expecting them to get a laugh with no situation of comedy happening around it. But getting back to the continuity problems, everyone has complained about how Sandy shouldn't be in this show, since SpongeBob already met her in the original series. And yes, that is a major problem that already retcons something that we knew about in the original show. Not only that, but Sandy herself is heavily flanderized in this show. She's basically just SpongeBob and Patrick in this show, meaning that in certain episodes like Tag Your It, she joins them in their shenanigans, when in the original series, she was more down to earth and was heavily into science, as well as karate, and usually stayed out of their shenanigans. I understand that Sandy is a bit younger, but this is just not consistent with her character at all. Next, let's talk about Squidward. I was originally going to let Squidward slide considering the fact that, unlike Sandy, we didn't really know about how Squidward met SpongeBob entirely, unless you count the special Truth or Square where Squidward's garden gets ruined due to a pineapple falling on it. However, thinking about everything else, this is a particular problem that I need to address. Squidward is a lot older than SpongeBob in the original show. Considering the fact that in Truth or Square, there was a flashback where Squidward was working at the Krusty Krab while SpongeBob was a baby. And in the original Fry Cook, Squidward worked with Jim before he worked with SpongeBob, and from the looks on the flashbacks in that episode, it was set in the 70s, probably before SpongeBob was even born. So I have no idea how Squidward and SpongeBob could meet as children in the original show, when Squidward was already an adult when SpongeBob came into the world. Mrs. Puff and SpongeBob met in the original series in a flashback, and Mr. Krabs was heavily implied to be the oldest character in the original show besides the elderly characters. Heck, the original series specifically stated that Mr. Krabs was in the war, and Mr. Krabs opened up the Krusty Krab before SpongeBob was even born. And there are also other little things, like how Gary shouldn't even be in this show since we found out how Gary was adopted in the original series, and we got the origin of Krabs and Plankton and why they both hate each other and wouldn't work together ever again. This problem with consistency even expands to a lot of the writing decisions as well, and in one of these cases, the integrity got broken so badly that it spreaded a ton of questions both to this show and a little bit towards the original show in one particular episode. The episode Kitchen Sponge, and why exactly I think it's the worst episode of the show, at least at the moment. In this episode, Mr. Krabs forces Plankton to get some help from SpongeBob with the food stand to make the food more edible, so SpongeBob ends up making a ton of food that ends up becoming expensive, so he ends up making what would eventually become the Krabby Patty secret formula. Plankton has a realization that he could use this formula to take over the fast food world, but through a giant plot twist, we realize the reason why Sandy is in this show. This particular discussion about this twist is going to go into major spoiler territory, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click to the time code where I just talk about my big problems that I have with this episode, so you don't get majorly spoiled. So, near the end of the episode, Plankton takes a bite from the Krabby Patty that SpongeBob made and has a flash to the future where he could take over the world with him having a secret formula in his hands. Which results in a chase sequence where SpongeBob chases Plankton all across the camp until eventually, the formula ends up burning to ashes when Sandy brings a portable campfire to that spot on the camp. And through a huge plot twist, we find out that the reason why Sandy is in this show is because her future self sent her past self to summer camp. And if you're wondering, yes, because this episode decided to have a 2D sequence where we see Sandy talking to her past self, this is confirmed to be canon with the original series. This entire episode is a major contradiction to everything that the original series set up, and it raises so many more questions than not that I don't even know where to start. Okay, here we go. First question that I have, if Sandy was supposedly supposed to go to summer camp to prevent this whole thing, why wasn't Plankton already ruling the fast food world at the beginning of the original series? Going by this show's logic, in Help Wanted, Mr. Krabs' business would be in terrible conditions, since Kitchen Sponge implied that Plankton was ruling the fast food world by the time that SpongeBob met Sandy in Tea at the Tree Dome. Second question, didn't we already have an origin story about how the Krabby Patty secret formula was made in the original series? I mean, I know that Camp Koral has entirely different writers and directors than those who have worked on seasons 4 and 5, but there is a way to proof check one of these episodes to see if something is going to contradict them or not. In the episode Friend or Foe, we got a backstory for both Mr. Krabs and Plankton and how they ended up becoming enemies. And we also found out about how the secret formula was made. It was made with the original ingredients on accident by Plankton, and when Mr. Krabs and Plankton started becoming enemies in the original series, they were also both kids. And in this show, they are both adults. So going by what the original series said, they should already be in rivalry with each other, considering the fact that this series is presumably set in their early adulthood. And third, and this is my biggest question of them all, how does SpongeBob know exactly how the formula is going to be made? In the original series, only Mr. Krabs knows about that, as said by the Sponge Out of Water movie, and SpongeBob forgets about the secret formula constantly in the original series. I was originally thinking about doing a review on this episode, and even talking about this show on Sean's Network Reviews, but I decided to abandon doing any other reviews on this show because there's barely much that I could say about this one. There's the obvious problems with how this show executes the animation and how it handles its continuity, but there's just nothing else to comment on. The show does have good-looking effects, and the show does at least put effort into trying to capture the feeling of the other SpongeBob series, unlike what the Tom and Jerry comedy show did, but the rest of the series is just white noise, at least at the moment. If you guys want to check out this series, it won't hurt if you actually do check it out. It's just that there are better shows out there. If you do want to watch this series, be my guest. However, if you do want to see much better shows than this, I would recommend watching Camp Lazlo instead, because Camp Lazlo is basically this show done better in every single way. It's entertaining, and at the same time, it does have notable things to comment on. It may not be as good as the other show that Joe Murray made, Rocko's Modern Life, but that show overall is fun, and while it does have certain similarities to SpongeBob, over time it ended up forming itself its own identity, and I would also recommend watching Summer Camp Island instead of this show too. Heck, instead of watching this show that ages down characters, watch A Pup Named Scooby-Doo and Tiny Toon Adventures, because they actually do interesting things with their premises, and they have enough comedy in them for you to not be distracted by the continuity. While I am going to be watching the rest of this series to see if it gets better or worse, For now, I think that this show would be a 5 out of 10 as a series on its own, since I didn't have too much to say about this show on its own, but a 4 out of 10 for two of the things added, both as a SpongeBob fan and someone who has seen that Nickelodeon can do much better things with 3D animation. In all honesty, if this is the approach that Nickelodeon decides to take with all of SpongeBob's other spin-offs, then it deeply worries me about what they're going to do with the Patrick Star Show, considering the fact that it's Patrick's family members that they're probably going to mess up the continuity for. Okay, so there's not much that I could say about Camp Koral. What videos am I going to make next? My next 3 episodes of Sean's network reviews on shows that are much more interesting to talk about. Goody!
On February 10th, 1940, MGM released an animated short film, Puss Gets the Boot. This cartoon would be the debut of a cat and mouse duo created by William Hanna and Joseph Barbera about a cat named Jasper trying to catch an unnamed mouse, although during pre-production the mouse was named Jinx. However, the mouse kept on outwitting the cat every time. Originally a one-off short, the demand for the cartoon duo was big enough that MGM greenlit more shorts of the pair, with the following feature, The Midnight Snack, premiering a year later on July 19th, 1941, now under their permanent names, Tom and Jerry. For over 8 years, the animated duo has delighted viewers of all ages with their slapstick hijinks and cartoonish over-the-top violence. Despite setbacks and controversies, Tom and Jerry have become a staple of animation history through various shorts, television shows, animated films, and most recently, a 2021 live-action animated hybrid that looks really bad. But hey, at least somebody's wearing their Rocky and Bullwinkle influence on their sleeves. Gotta respect that. Well, most may believe that, not counting the short films released in theaters and odd appearances in musicals like Anchors Away, this is the first time Tom and Jerry has a proper theatrical feature-length release in theaters and streaming on HBO Max. But people will tend to forget that there was a theatrical film released almost 30 years ago in 1992 titled Tom and Jerry, the Movie. But why has this been swept under the rug, you may ask? Well, it's quite easy. The movie sucks. Let's talk about it. The backstory. Much like the development hell that the new Tom and Jerry movie has, the very first movie also had a long development cycle. It's often been speculated when development began, as there were rumors of a movie idea during their peak period in the 50s and 60s. There was a point in time when, after the revival of the series in the 70s, when famed Looney Tunes animation director Chuck Jones, who also helmed his own shorts for the duo, was tasked to helm a movie adaptation, only to follow through when there wasn't a good enough story for the project. Another attempt came when MGM commissioned David Newman, one of the co-writers for Arthur Penn's Bonnie and Clyde, to write a script for a live-action adaptation of the film. I would make a joke about the writer from one of the most notoriously violent movies to write a kids movie, but he probably was in the right ballpark, I'm just saying. Now when I say live action, I'm not referring to a live action animation hybrid like the recent movie. No, they were gonna have Dustin Hoffman and Chevy Chase dress up in cat and mouse costumes and play the duo. I am just as baffled as you guys are. Obviously this fell through, and so development waited until the late 80s when Phil Roman and his production company Film Roman, oh I see what they did there, picked up the reins, with Phil directing. Who is Phil Roman, you may ask? Well, Phil has a long career in animation, starting as an assistant on Sleeping Beauty and being a lead animator for Chuck Jones' adaptation of The Grinch. But he's probably best known for his extensive work in various Peanuts and Garfield television specials, often serving as a director for numerous specials. He even had a hand at being an animation executive producer for numerous Simpsons and King of the Hill episodes during the 90s. So it seems like the movie is in good hands, especially knowing that Joseph Barbera served as a creative consultant for the film. However, the movie did not end that well. Despite Tom and Jerry franchise getting another boost thanks to the launch of Cartoon Network and nostalgia for the golden age cartoons during the 90s, the movie tanked with critics, currently scoring a 14% on Rotten Tomatoes, and not being all that profitable at the box office, grossing over $3.6 million against a $3.5 million budget, which meant that while it did make back its money, it wasn't enough to turn a profit. This marked a huge blow for the franchise as, for over 2 decades, Tom and Jerry movies would go direct to video. Film Roman, while still continuing on as an animation company, wouldn't helm another animated feature for over a decade until helping out with the animation for the Simpsons movie in 2007 and doing work for My First Mister? What? The movie. So the movie doesn't start off on that bad of a note. It began with Tom and Jerry doing their shtick, so it kind of tricks you into thinking that it will be a faithful adaptation. Even with credits to voice actors, maybe it would be just like, you know, grunts and yells and random noises. Yeah, see? So Tom is moving away because his house is being demolished. He gets lost because he was trying to kill Jerry because, well, canonically he's an idiot. He gets chased by a dog, who wasn't Spike, and gets trapped in the house. It gets demolished, but he saves Jerry. Wait, is that Nipples and Drag? And now they are homeless, forced to live life on the lam in the cruel, cruel streets. How depressing. They then meet a stray dog named Pugsy, and his little flea friend.
And instead of being pals, you're fighting like a cat and a mouse. That's racist. The name is Pugsy. What's yours?
I'm Tom.
I'm Jerry.
Did they just talk? I get it. It's supposed to be a joke. Throw a curveball at us. Okay, I see what you're doing.
Well, sure I talk. What do you think I am, a dummy?
You said it.
Oh no! So this is the most notorious reason why people don't like this movie. Tom and Jerry just flat out talk throughout the entire movie. And it's weird. Like, okay, yeah, sure, they have spoken before. It's not like it's an out of the blue thing.
Burning. Burning. Say, something is burning around here.
But the thing is, it happens very rarely, and almost all the times it was treated as a joke. But this is entirely earnest, and it just does not work. Like, it would be one of those things if they still acted like Tom and Jerry, but they just stopped acting like their normal selves once they start talking. With a few exceptions of slapstick, most of their humor comes from banter with each other. And it's not that funny. And they basically become peripheral to the story. About 20 minutes in, the actual plot starts, and we meet this little girl named Robin. She lives with her mean Aunt Fig, and she gets all sad because her dad has gone missing. And it soon becomes all about her, and Tom and Jerry are just there. If you remember back when that one Tom and Jerry movie where they did Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the major complaint people have, despite it being too soon after Gene Wilder's passing and some unpleasant animation, is that Tom and Jerry are slapped on the story of the original movie and don't contribute much authentically that doesn't already come from the original movie. Despite that this is an original story, this is also true. Tom and Jerry basically become completely different characters and are only there to serve this little random girl in her story. It just begs the question, why is this a Tom and Jerry movie? Like any other cartoon adaptations to the big screen, at least it does the bare minimum of having them being the main characters and a plot written around them. Why is Tom and Jerry just a footnote instead of the main drive? Why is this character the main focus of the plot? This is the cute little girl that she's sad. Oh no, who cares? As mentioned before, Joseph Barbera served as a creative consultant. Reportedly, he didn't come up with the idea for Tom and Jerry speaking, and actually said it was a bad idea. But the people making the movie basically ignored him, because they felt like that Tom and Jerry not talking would be boring to the audience. Somehow. Man, I wonder what it's like when Joe saw this turd.
Stop it, please, I beg you! It's a sin! It's a sin!
Wait, Joseph Barbera isn't British? So who is this girl? Well, let's say before her name is Robin, and she is an orphan. She is currently living with her Aunt Fig because her father goes missing on an archaeology expedition or something. I don't remember what his main job is, but he's basically Indiana Jones with a mustache. However, her aunt is evil and kidnaps her because of her inheritance money. So it's up to her animal friends to save this little girl from— Hey, quit showing the rescuers! This is a completely different movie! Yeah, that's another reason why people don't like this movie. It's just a shameless ripoff of the rescuers. Well, okay, not entirely by the plot points in the storyline, but it's essentially the same. Two anthropomorphic animals go out on an adventure to save this cute little girl for the child audience to latch onto. She is kidnapped by some crazy lady and her lackey. There's an evil animal psychic, and in the end, the girl is saved. It's practically the same movie. Now, personally, I don't really care much for the rescuers. I find it a bit underwritten, personally, with the characters and the story. Yet I can still say this is a much better movie than this clown show going on here. For one, it's much darker than you expect from a Disney movie. It's very moody, atmospheric, melancholic, and a sense of danger. Like, real danger. And this movie just doesn't. The whole element of tension doesn't really exist because it doesn't feel like there's any sense of danger for this girl. Like, she isn't held captive, she's just staying with her aunt because her father went on an expedition. And it's not like he's dead either, he's still alive, he just got tangled up, but her aunt decides to lie about it. Why? Well, isn't it obvious?
We've got to have money.
He said it! He said it!
Honestly, this whole ruse just doesn't make a lick of sense. Like, in The Rescuers, the reason why Penny was kidnapped was because she could fit in the hole where the diamond is buried at. She didn't have any connections to the bad guys, and she was just some random girl and felt like a disposable object. So, in a way, it kind of makes sense. Here, Robin is just kidnapped because her aunt is her caretaker while her father is presumed dead, and without her, the aunt is out of money because I guess she's just that unlikable that she no longer benefits from the family wealth. I mean, I wouldn't blame the family if one of my relatives looked like a mix of Ursula, Nurse Ratched, and the mother from The Wall. But then it turned out that the father is alive, which throws a monkey wrench in the whole plan, so now that she just lies about it, pretend that the father is dead, which doesn't make sense because, like, the father would still come back to get her daughter. But I guess locking her up in the banister for the rest of her life like Rapunzel would work. Oh wait, she could just climb out the window. Idiots! Does she even have a job? How can she afford this mansion if she's close to being broke without her? How can she afford the lawyer, who, by the way, is named Lickboot? Ill. So Robin becomes friends with Tom and Jerry, they stay at the mansion, hijinks ensues with the dog, who, by the way, sounds like Golem.
Pressure.
And so the aunt sends the duo away to a vet named Apple Cheeks. These goddamn names. It turns out evil follows evil, as Apple Cheeks is actually an evil vet who kidnaps dogs in order to collect the reward monies from the owners, along with his two henchmen, who are not doing a good job of being discreet, you morons. He doesn't just explain his plot in an exposition dump. Oh no! He sings about it.
Yes, animals are business, a money-making business.
Oh yeah, did I forget to mention that this is a musical? Yes, because if bastardizing the silent duo by having them talk wasn't enough, then show tunes certainly will. When the movie was in production, it was right when Disney were at the beginning of their renaissance. And so they basically looked at that and went, yeah, we can do that. Except they didn't. The music itself is fine, honestly. It's a deliberate throwback to classic MGM musicals like The Wizard of Oz or Singing in the Rain. It is a bit refreshing to hear this style in a 90s animated musical than trying to ape Disney or even most musicals from Disney during this time. The only exception to this is that Robin gets her own song, and it's painfully transparent that they are just ripping off Somewhere Out There from An American Tail. The problem is that they don't really serve much of a purpose organically within the film. They feel more like filler to pad out the film's runtime. Both villain songs are unnecessary because their goals and motivations are already stated beforehand, so these numbers fall flat. The same is true about Robin's song, it just adds nothing. The only one that kind of works is the first song when Tom and Jerry started to speak, and it doesn't make much sense within the story. It's a song about how great it is to have a friend, which they immediately throw out after it ends.
Well, what do you say, fellas?
A cat and a mouse? Friends? That's disgusting.
That's racist.
And even leading up to it also doesn't make sense since Tom saves Jerry from the demolishing building. There's a musical number that takes place like 5 minutes after the first one, where the movie introduces these ruffian cats, and they sing about not being nice and being rude and mean, and it's just there for no reason. We never see these West Side felines ever again, and they just show up and immediately fuck right off. What was the point in this? These songs don't add anything to the movie. It doesn't heighten the emotions. It's not audacious. It's not even memorable. I can't even recall a melody from this movie after I finished watching. It honestly felt like the music was just an afterthought and was only thrown in to make it a feature length. And what's even more surprising is who they got to do the music. Henry Mancini and Leslie Bricusse. If you don't know their work, they both won an Oscar for the music for Victor or Victoria and have very prominent solo careers. Bricouse wrote the music for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and the lyrics for the Bond themes, Goldfinger and You Only Live Twice. While Mancini has the most prestigious career of the two, most notably doing the Pure Gun theme, his frequent collaborations with director Blake Edwards, including the music for the Pink Panther franchise, winning an Oscar for Moon River, his arrangement for the love theme of Romeo and Juliet topped the Billboard charts, and not to mention multiple compositions from movies like Touch of Evil, Charade, The Great Mouse Detective. You expect better music from two talented composers. Speaking of expectations, the animation. It's fine, I guess. It is clear that this movie is a low-budget anime movie, and you can tell as it doesn't have the polish of what Disney was doing at the time, but in terms of the actual definition of animation, how they move and whatnot, it's fine. Nothing too groundbreaking. A few moments do look pretty damn good. Other moments you can certainly tell it was made on the cheap end. Jerry feels rather inconsistent in scale. Sometimes the characters do go off-model between keyframes. Overall, it's just fine. However, this is Tom and Jerry, famous for their cartoon slapstick, so you expect the same high quality to be transferred over from the shorts to here, and yet it falls rather flat. For one, there isn't a whole lot of slapstick, as it takes a backseat to the plot and musical numbers, which, as we established before, are not very good. And the actual humor doesn't have the same punch to it. Like, revisiting some old Tom and Jerry shorts, the differences between this is night and day. For one, the movie is over-animated. It doesn't feel like the animators were given keyframes to use, so they just animate the characters from the first frame to last. Often the characters do feel too rubbery and loose. Like they have no structure or order, and that no one can really stay still. The other being the sound effects. Sound is very important to comedy with how the delivery can come across, especially for slapstick comedies like Tom and Jerry. And the shorts are filled with dynamic sounds that help with the impact of jokes. With this, the sounds just don't pop. And I feel that's largely goes with the sound mixing for these slapstick scenes. For whatever reason, it sounds like they are mixed to the same level as the film score. It just muddies the impact of the jokes and gives it a much lower impact than it really should. Also, I should mention this moment in the opening where Jerry slices Tom up. This was the first time blood could be seen in a Tom and Jerry cartoon, which hilariously, according to the IMDb trivia, is the reason why it has such a low reputation amongst fans. Okay, we should probably go back and talk about this plot for this godforsaken film. Jesus, I don't want to do this. So Tom and Jerry are kidnapped, but they soon break out and free all the animals trapped. I was paid scale for this cameo. They go back to Robin and tell her the news about her father.
To bed? If that's where my daddy is, that's where I'm going.
I mean, why do you have to journey to Tibet? Your bed is right there! Fuck you! They escape and start Tom Sawyering it down the river, or is it Huckleberry Finn? I don't know, they get hit by a ship. Family fun, woo! Robin is rescued by... Well, that's terrifying.
You are the lucky guest of Captain Kitty, king of the county fair, pirate of pleasure, and... Oh yes, and my first mate, Squawk.
He's funny.
Don't encourage him! I don't get why they decided to just throw in a character in the last minute as the movie is almost done, other than just plot contrivance. In fact, it just complicates this plot even more. So by this point, Robin has gone missing, and so Aunt Fig and Lick Boot decides to put out a missing ad on milk cartons in order for her to be lured back to them if somebody sees her, along with a reward for $1 million.
So we offer a reward for her. Someone will turn her in. Big reward, say $1 million.
But we don't have $1 million.
I know. That's why it's so sleazy.
Yeah, so then they can see you and go to the police when you ditch them. Morons! So Captain Kitty kidnaps Robin by trapping her in a Ferris wheel for some reason. Like, he didn't have to do that. He didn't know that she might escape. He's just being extra for the sake of it. Aunt Fig gets a call from the captain while Applecheeks is there as he complains to her about his destroyed facility. He overhears how much the reward money is and decides to basically go after them to get Robin. Even though Robin is with the crazy puppeteer, it just seems kind of useless at this point. Like, he could have just robbed Aunt Fig because he's right there at her place. To make things more complicated, Applecheek's goons decide to betray him to get the reward money, and so Applecheeks has to steal an ice cream bike and looking like my sleep paralysis demon. So, to clarify, an orphan girl is on the run from her evil aunt, a greedy lawyer, a golem dog, a crazy puppeteer, 2 dog nappers, an evil veterinarian who kidnaps animals for a living, with the latter 3 wanting to get the reward money placed on her despite being a ruse so that the evil aunt, greedy lawyer, and golem dog can just keep Robin and her inheritance for themselves, since Robin's father, Indiana Jones with a mustache, is presumed missing, but he's actually alive and heading to where he thinks Robin is at. Need I remind the audience that this is supposed to be a Tom and Jerry movie? Eventually, the 3 heroes are conveniently at the old lake house Robin and her dad goes to, which is exactly where Robin's father was going to. Ha! Ain't that neat? But the aunt catches up with them and soon the house burns down. Oh no, they're all gonna die and I don't care. But look! Robin's dad is here to save the day! Oh, what a happy occasion it is! Oh wait, he left Tom and Jerry to die.
Don't cry, Robin. We'll find them.
We'll find their charred remains. Don't worry, Robin. You'll be traumatized soon enough. Yeah, of course they make it out alive, and everyone gets a happy ending. Robin is reunited with her dad, she adopts Tom and Jerry, they start going back to their old ways, and I die slowly on the inside, wasting my time watching this. Even fucking Pugsy and his flea friend gets a happy ending. Yeah, he was such an important character that we have to see him hop on a train right off into the sunset. Where exactly? Who knows? My best guess is that they're gonna go to California to work on a ranch and hope to earn enough to live off the fat of the land.
Yeah, I can see it. Right over there. I can see it.
Yeah, I'm making references to classic American literature. What, did you just expect a dumb joke on lame animated kids films? I have higher standards for my humor. How dare you? So that was Tom and Jerry's first foray into feature films, and I gotta say, this was flat out boring. Obviously, the issue is that putting characters who only appear in 7 to 8 minute shorts in an hour and a half just doesn't make for a compelling story. Who would have thunk? But I feel like the bigger issue here is just a simple question. Why does this need to exist? And I cannot tell you a reason why. The fans won't like it because it's nothing like the source material. Newcomers wouldn't know who these characters are or why they matter. The story is just copying better films. The musical numbers are forgettable. The animation isn't even that great. Literally, why the hell would anyone watch this? Why would they even make this movie?
We've got to have money.
Oh, put a sock in it. And I think that's the most damning thing I can say about this movie. Hell, any movie. It just feels like nothing. A big, empty, black void that fills my monitor as I watch this for an hour and a half. In fact, did I even talk about a movie? Did I even see a movie? Did I see? Can I see? How does one see? No, that's stupid. That's a stupid question. Why ask such a stupid question? Say what you will about the newest Tom and Jerry movie, but at least that will look like something someone would watch. Well, let's hope that's actually good. I mean, I have high hopes. It comes from the same director that made the best Fantastic Four movie. I'm sad that I actually mean that.